Welcome, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. We are going to have yet another one of our great late night conversations. We're starting a little bit earlier because Saturday is a big night for this YouTube channel. So I want to be with you as long as I can, and I've got church tomorrow morning, so I want to give it my all, give you all a good long stream, and then go to sleep. And yeah, glad that you all are here. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. A lot of exciting things are happening, which we are going to talk about. The way we do things on this channel is first I give my opening remarks, and they are then followed by the roll call, where we find out who is watching, who's on the other side of the camera. Then after that, I answer your super chat questions for the remainder of the show. So if you got something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, by all means, send me a super chat on YouTube or a Rumble rant on Rumble. It is you all that make the second half of the show happen. Yeah, please send. You guys have been doing a great job lately. And tonight we're starting early, right? We usually don't start till 9, but tonight we're starting early so that we'll have plenty of time to answer a lot of questions. I'm feeling energized. Yeah, send some super chats. Couple announcements. First, I guess we'll just mention, if you are interested in CPI and the Center for Political Innovation, what it is that we teach, our belief system, innovationism, the kind of anti-imperialist movement we're trying to build. We're having a workshop in Minneapolis on February 22nd, which is a Saturday. I just booked my flight. I'm headed out to Minneapolis for Saturday, February 22nd. It's going to be pretty awesome. It's going to be a great workshop. So if you're in the area, if you're in the Midwest, the upper northern Midwest, come on out. It should be a lot of fun. If you want to come, you just need to register. I'll drop the link in the chat to register. We should have an email invitation out in the next little bit to everyone on our email list, and we'll be making announcements. But yeah, it's going to be a great workshop. We did one in Chicago this fall. It was really, really great. We're doing this next one in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So we're heading out to Minnesota. So join us for that workshop. Another bit of unfortunate news. I did receive word that Harpal Brar, the leader of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, who's been on this channel many times. We had a 25-part podcast series with him and his daughter, Jyoti Brar, that he passed away at the age of 85. And I have a lot of strong feelings about Harpal Brar. And I was thinking I would do a tribute tonight to Harpal Brar. And then I realized that this tribute that I'm going to do to Harpal Brar is going to be many, many hours long, because there are so many important political lessons in Harpal Brar's life. Harpal Brar is somebody who just kept showing up in my life. I first heard Harpal Brar's name when I was a 15-year-old teenager. And I ended up, having his daughter fly into the United States and speaking at CPI conferences and having a 25-part podcast with him. And Harpal Brar is just somebody who has just shown up in my life over and over and over again. For all of my adult life, I have been continuously hearing about Harpal Brar, and I would like to consider myself a personal friend of two of his adult children, Jyoti and Ranjit. And I've learned so much from the man and his work over the years. And there's so many important political lessons tied up with that man's life. So in the next few days, we're going to have a special live stream, and it will be called What Harpal Brar Meant to Me. I mean, I know I've studied Harpal Brar's works and all of that, and I will do my best to kind of give a political tribute to Harpal Brar. I did not know him as a father. I did not know him as a businessman. I did not even ever really know him as a comrade because I was never in the same political organization as him. I know him as a great thinker, writer, and teacher. Largely, I knew him as a teacher. And so my tribute to Harpal Brar will be, in honor of him as a teacher. That is how I will commemorate him and what I learned from Harpal Brar. From the other side of the pond, he was in Britain. I am here in the United States. So keep your eyes out for that, because so much of what we talk about on this channel on many different levels is wrapped up with Harpal Brar. Yes, David Fox out in Australia. I'm sure you could say the same thing. You have been hearing the name Harpal for year after year after year, and learning so much from him. And, there's so much to say. There's so much that needs to be said about Harpal Brar. I was talking with Gavin. I was talking with other people, and I'm going to put together a political tribute to Harpal Brar. And we're doing that here. I would never have developed the way that I developed without studying Harpal's works, listening to hours of Harpal Brar's lectures, becoming friends with Harpal Brar's political organization, with his family members. And so he was a dynamic person, as Phil says, a legend of a man in many, many ways. I think, there's not much more I can say about it tonight, because I don't want to, it's going to be a really long stream. Let me just put it that way. I was sitting there, and there's just so many things in my life, in my political development, so many important lessons that I've learned and struggles I've been involved in, and concepts that I've learned to wrap my mind around. Harpal Brar is heavily involved in them. So I will give a political tribute to Harpal Brar. I assume that there will be a regular memorial service in Britain, where his family members will speak of him as a father, will speak of him, his comrades will speak of him as a mentor and a comrade in a political organization. I did not know him in that context. And it's interesting because I met his daughter many times in person. I met his son once in person. I've actually never met him in person, but we did 25 podcasts together. But anyway, so just wanted to give you a little preempt that we will be doing that on a future stream. So on that note, I do want to remind you all that the way these streams work is I give my opening remarks, and then from there we do a roll call. We find out who is watching, who's on the other side of the camera. And then from there, I answer your super chat questions for the remainder of the show. So if there's something that you would like me to talk about in the second half of the program, all you need to do is send me a super chat here on YouTube or a Rumble rant here on Rumble. If you're watching on Facebook, I cannot see Facebook, so you're going to have to send your question via YouTube super chat or Rumble rant on Rumble. But it is your questions, folks, that make this show what it is, right? The second half of the show is what people are here for me to react to things, for me to, answer things off the cuff. That's what's natural. Nobody wants to listen to someone read a prepared speech, right? Everyone loves to hear people interacting and off the cuff. I mean, if I just wanted to get on here and talk, I would record it and upload it afterwards. But there's a reason that all of you are in the chat. And that's because we're a community. And what we're making here is a collective product. It is a collective product. I'm reacting to you. I'm seeing the chat as it goes by. You guys are asking questions. And that's the beauty of what we are doing. So please, if you have something that you feel I should react to, something you're curious about, something you want me to address, comment on, etc., just send a super chat, please. please please send a super chat or a Rumble rant and get me talking in the second half of the show. So yeah, on that note, I will just jump into my opening remarks. Folks, there's some things that we need to be absolutely clear about before we start talking about Russia and Ukraine and the new administration in Washington, D.C. and building our movement. Before we do any of that, we have to address some basic things, because I get very annoyed seeing this headline. I just got the latest issue of The Economist. And this headline, The Imperial Presidency, Project 1897. And I'm shaking my head. I'm absolutely shaking my head, because nobody knows what imperialism is. And if you don't know what imperialism is, you're politically lost. You are absolutely politically lost. So what are they saying with this headline? Well, they're saying that, Donald Trump has talked about expanding the United States to Canada, to Greenland, and to Panama. And they're recalling the Spanish-American War and the U.S. Colonialism and territorial expansion of the 1890s and early 1900s. And they're saying that that's what imperialism is. So Donald Trump must be a big imperialist, right? And he's got his top hat on, and they're saying, oh, Donald Trump is going back to the age of imperialism. Well, this is deeply frustrating to me, right? And this is what they teach in school. I was taught, well, America was one time an imperialist country a long time ago. They said, we took over Cuba, we took over the Philippines, and there was a time in like early 1900 where we did engage in territorial expansion, and that was imperialism. But we stopped doing that, and now the USA is not imperialist, because that's what imperialism is. We're told it's when a country expands its own borders. Well, that's not what imperialism is. That's called colonialism. And that's colonialism. When a country seizes territory and it makes it part of its own country, that's called colonialism. And colonialism started with the Spanish, right? Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, 1492. And, the Spanish also started going into Africa. And then the British got in on it, and, the French and the Portuguese, and that, yes, the countries of Europe, as they were emerging from feudalism into modern capitalism, they engaged in seizing parts of the world that were, quote, newly discovered because they hadn't seen them, and claiming them for themselves. And that was the age of colonialism. But that is not what imperialism is. Imperialism and colonialism are not synonyms. Imperialism is an economic system. Imperialism is not a policy. It is not something that a country engages in. Imperialism is a system. And if you don't know this, you are politically lost. Imperialism is not annexation. It's not changing or moving a country's borders. It's not mistreating other countries. Imperialism is a system. I cannot say this enough. Imperialism is a system. What is imperialism? Imperialism is an economic system. It is an economic system. How many times? I'm going to say this again, and I am going to say this again, and I'm going to say this again. Imperialism is an economic system. And I am at the point where I understand what imperialism is in three different ways. There are three different angles through which you can understand what imperialism is. The first one is the angle that predates Lenin, that began around the time of the American Civil War, and even before that. The first kind of glimpse of what imperialism is that I would point to, the first observation of the economic system of imperialism, I would trace back to Henry Charles Carey. Henry Charles Carey was an economist in the United States who was an economic advisor to Abraham Lincoln, and he was very, very opposed to slavery. And he wrote a pamphlet opposing slavery. And the pamphlet was intended to point to the economic roots and foundations of slavery. Why did slavery exist? That's what he was writing about in this pamphlet. Why is it that in America, we're this modern country that fought a revolution against the British, why do we have slavery? And in this pamphlet that Henry Charles Carey wrote, explaining the way the slave economy of the South worked and how that was contrary to the North and everything that he wrote, he ended his pamphlet with this very, very important passage. This is what Henry Charles Carey wrote. Two systems are before the world. One looks to exporting men to occupy desert tracts, the sovereignty of which is obtained by aid of diplomacy or war. The other to increasing the value of an immense extent of vacant land by importing men by millions for their occupation. One looks to the concentration of wealth and power in a great commercial city, which shall rival the great cities of modern times, which have been and are being supported by aid and contributions which have exhausted every nation subjected to them. The other, to concentration by aid of which a market shall be made upon the land for the products of the land, and the farmer and the planter be enriched. One looks to increasing the necessity for commerce, the other to increasing the power to maintain it. One looks to underworking the Hindu and sinking the rest of the world to his level, the other to raising the standard of man throughout the world to our level. One looks to pauperism, ignorance, depopulation, and barbarism, the other to increasing wealth, comfort, intelligence, combination of action, and civilization. One looks toward universal war, the other toward universal peace. One is the English system. The other, we may be proud to call the American system, for it is the only one ever devised, the tendency of which was that of elevating while equalizing the condition of man throughout the world. And such is the true mission of the United States. Now, that's a heavy passage from Henry Charles Carey. He's saying quite a lot there. But what is he saying? He's saying that England has set up this global empire that is all about concentrating the wealth of the world in a mighty city. It's all about seizing chunks of the world, seizing desert tracts. It's about universal war. It's about underworking the Hindu and sinking the rest of the world down to his level. He's talking about when the British Empire went to India and burned all the textile looms and forced the people of India to import their cloth from Britain. He's talking about depopulation, driving down the population, driving down living standards. And he's saying that in opposition to it, the economic principles of Alexander Hamilton and some of the American revolutionaries, the anti-slavery wing of the American Revolution, was an economy based on economic growth. And like he talks about, one is about increasing the necessity of commerce, of selling and buying, right? That you constantly have to be selling and buying. And the other is about increasing the power to maintain it, meaning increasing technology, increasing the amount of wealth that's being produced so that commerce just kind of naturally goes on because wealth is expanding. So one is about constantly, financializing everything, and the other is about building and developing. And he's describing two very distinct economic modes. And he's talking about how in Britain, the city of London, the London Stock Exchange that dominates the world, that maintains huge fleets and controls the trade routes, that sinks whole nations into poverty while building up just one little city, that drives down living standards, that impoverishes and deindustrializes the country it takes over, right? that is this new system. He's describing the English system. And against it, he contrasts the ideas of Alexander Hamilton and himself, the idea that the state should invest in building infrastructure like lighthouses and roads. There should be a national bank that oversees economic development and is focused on building up physical economy. That there was an economy at that time that was emerging that was about the rule of the world by bankers, not manufacturers, who were essentially making the world poorer and poorer and poorer and centering themselves in their mighty cities as global middlemen. Everyone who has to trade has to go through them, and impoverishing the world. And that was in opposition to the vision of Alexander Hamilton and himself and other figures in the American Revolution of an industrial economy based on actually expanding the wealth and living standards of man. Now, that was the very, very beginning. This was, I believe, that pamphlet was published in the 1840s, possibly earlier. Karl Marx read that pamphlet, and he said it was the only economic writing in America of any merit. And he said that Henry Charles Carey was the only economist in America of any worth or merit. And that's the first kind of glimpse of the economic system of imperialism. When Henry Charles Carey writes about the English system, he's writing about an economic system. But ultimately, the understanding of imperialism that proliferated and became the most important was the understanding put forward by Vladimir Lenin at the time of the Russian Revolution. When World War I broke out, Lenin came forward and he said that we're not living under ordinary capitalism. Capitalism has entered a new stage called imperialism. And in our Center for Political Innovation textbook, you can find Lenin's definition of imperialism. Lenin wrote this very important book in 1916 called Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. And in that book, he basically explained why World War I was happening and what the people of the world and what they were up against. This is what Vladimir Lenin wrote, as quoted in our textbook, We Are City Builders. Imperialism is a specific historical stage of capitalism. It is a specific character, threefold. Imperialism is monopoly capitalism, parasitic or decaying capitalism, moribund capitalism. The supplanting of free competition by monopoly is the fundamental economic feature, the quintessence of imperialism. Monopoly manifests itself in 5 forms. 1, cartels, syndicates, and trusts. The concentration of production has reached a degree that gives rise to monopolistic associations of capitalists. 2, the monopolistic position of big banks. 3, 4, or 5 giant banks manipulate the whole economy of America, France, or Germany. 3, the seizure of raw material by trusts and the financial oligarchy. Finance capital is monopoly, industrial capital merged with bank capital. 4, the economic partition of the world by the international cartels have begun. There are already over 100 such cartels which command the entire world market and divide it amicably among themselves until war redivides it. The export of capital, as distinct from the export of commodities under non-monopoly capitalism, is a highly characteristic phenomenon and is closely associated with economic and territorial partition. And 5, the territorial partition of the world into colonies is completed. Now, that's what Lenin was explaining when he described how capitalism was in a completely new stage, and that everything we kind of knew about capitalism was being redefined. Now, what was Lenin describing? Number 1, he's describing the supplanting of free competition. And this is something that that a lot of people that fall into the libertarian mindset and the neoliberal ideology will say, oh, well, the problem isn't capitalism, Caleb. It's that we don't have real capitalism because there's not free competition. The government is heavily involved in maintaining the power of these gigantic corporations. That's called monopoly, right? We don't have free competition. We do have a government that is in bed with the biggest and largest corporations, and that government rigs things in order to secure the power of those corporations. That government sits down and lets those corporations write the laws, and that government actually goes to war around the world to secure the monopoly and the profits of those corporations. And that's not classical free market, and that's not the industrial era of robber barons and, and steel trust magnates and all of that. This is an era where most corporations are tied in with big banks. Banks sit at the center of a number of different industries, and these trusts, cartels, and syndicates, these huge centers of economic power with a bank in the center of it, a bank that's the lifeblood by supplying the credit, and various manufacturing corporations tied in it. They dominate the world. And what is he writing about? Well, first of all, bankers are in control. It used to be that the people who ran capitalism were factory owners. They made products. Well, now the people who run things in the age of monopoly capitalism are bankers, people who lend money. The financiers who lend money at interest. They don't make products. They make money by having money, right? They give people money and then they pay it back with interest, and that's how they make their money. They're not creating any physical value. They're simply increasing their wealth by having wealth. They pump money into industries. They pump money into various places, and then the money comes back to them. And what is one of the main ways bankers make money? Lending money to the government. Did you know that when you pay your taxes, that money is not actually going to pay for things like schools and hospitals or even the military? No, your money is going to pay back the banks that the government borrowed money from to pay for the schools and hospitals and all of those things. And these banks lend money to the government, and the government pays it back at interest. And that is how these banks make money. And these banks sit at the center of trusts, cartels, and syndicates. And it's monopoly capitalism, where these big monopoly corporations, their monopolistic position is maintained by the government. The government rigs everything to make sure they have what they want. The government lets them write the laws, and the government goes to war around the world and uses its power as a state to maintain their monopoly. And libertarians look at this and they say, well, that's not real capitalism. You are correct. It is not industrial capitalism. It is the natural conclusion of capitalism. It is monopolistic capitalism. It is capitalism in its monopolistic stage, right? One thing that you will learn is, if you study the market, is that capitalism is constantly moving toward monopoly. And in fact, that's why we have antitrust laws. We have all kinds of laws that are written to try and prevent monopoly. The way capitalism naturally develops, some companies go out of business and some companies thrive. And that if the market is just kind of left to its own devices, you get to the point where you have one giant corporation and then the economy comes to a grinding halt. It's called monopolistic stagnation. And so the capitalists themselves have thought of all kinds of mechanisms to keep competition going so that they don't have monopolistic stagnation. For example, here's a great example. Right? A few years ago, the Chinese billionaire who owns AMC movie theaters, he wanted to buy one of the big 7 Hollywood studios. And he went out to buy one of the big 7 Hollywood studios. What happened? And the government stepped in and said, nope, you can't do that. And you would say, why can't he do that, right? He's a capitalist. He's got money. He owns this chain of movie theaters. Why can't he own a Hollywood studio? You know why? There is a law that has been passed that if you own a movie studio, you cannot own a movie theater chain. And if you own a movie theater chain, you cannot own a movie studio. Why? Why do they have that law? Well, think about it. If you were a capitalist and you owned a chain of movie theaters, and you were a capitalist and you then acquired a movie studio, what would you do? You would only show your own movies in the movie theater. Why would you show the competition, right? You want to maintain your monopoly, so you own a chain of theaters and you own a Hollywood studio. It's just basic common sense. You would only show your own movies. And that would lead to monopoly. And they want it to be a competition where the movie theaters are showing movies from various different studios. So there's a special law that has been passed that says if you own a movie theater company, you cannot own a movie studio. And that law wasn't passed by communists. And that law wasn't passed by socialism and the workers' power. It was passed by movie theater owners. And it was passed by movie studio owners because they want to keep the entertainment industry thriving. And if they didn't have this law, there would be monopoly, and that would lead to the entire industry slowing down. There's many examples. I used to work in the insurance industry. I learned that it is absolutely against the rules. If you are an insurance salesman and you are selling insurance to a private company, this is very interesting. I had no idea until I worked in the insurance industry, and this was explained to me. So if you are a licensed insurance salesman and you're selling insurance to bars and restaurants or to private companies, workers' comp insurance, health insurance, whatever, one thing that you cannot do is give a kickback to the person who buys it from you. Why not? Right? I mean, why not? It's your money, right? Well, if you're an insurance salesman, you get paid, you get commission for how much insurance you sell. So it would be just common sense that you would then go to, if you're selling insurance to a bar, you would go to the bar owner and say, hey, if you buy the insurance from me, I get $100 in my commission. I'll give you $50 and you'll buy it from me. So you'll make money. That's illegal, right? That is illegal. Why? Because there wouldn't be free competition then. You're paying someone to buy from you. That is illegal. And there are all kinds of laws like this that have been made to prevent what is the natural working of capitalism, monopoly, right? Setting up a situation where you only have one company. And if you only have one company, there's no competition, and the market comes to a grinding halt. And this is the kind of thing that John Maynard Keynes wrote about. And they used to teach this in economics. They called it market failures, right? That left to its own devices, you get one gigantic corporation that then can do whatever it wants, can charge whatever price it wants, and it's really, really bad for the economy. And so capitalists go out of their way to prevent monopolies. And usually when it comes to movie theaters, are there 100 different chains of movie theaters? No, there are about 4 or 5. And that's how about every industry is in America. In America, you got the big 3 car companies. You got some foreign car companies. In Hollywood, you have the big 7 studios. And that there's usually a small number, like less than 10, of any of each. So there's competition between 5 or 6 or 3 or 4. We have the big 3 automakers, right? We have the 7 movie. There's a small number of major monopolistic corporations that dominate every field. And the government works overtime to make sure they all don't merge into one, because then our economy would fall apart. And this is what libertarians don't understand. They have said, I have seen libertarians say many times, there would never be any monopolies if it wasn't for the government. No. The corporations themselves have gone out of their way to make antitrust legislation to make sure they don't all merge into one because they need competition. Do you know how many times that one of the big 3 automakers in America has been going to go out of business, and then the government steps in to bail them out to make sure that there's competition, right? Chrysler has gone under many times. Ford has gone under, and the government steps in and bails them out because it doesn't want there to be one auto company, because that would ruin the car industry in America. So monopolism, the gigantic corporations that are in bed with the government, this is the natural progression of capitalism. Capitalism leads to monopoly. And these trusts, cartels, and syndicates tend to be centered around big banks. And we enter an era where in the past, countries exported products, right? In Britain, they had a lot of coal. So in Britain, you had coal companies, and those coal companies in Britain would mine the coal, and then they would export it, and people would buy coal from Britain. And, in America, we had a lot of oil. So America, we had our oil, and we would, get the oil out of the ground, extract it, and refine it. And then countries around the world would buy our oil. It was the export of commodities. We're selling oil. We're selling coal. We're selling cotton during the slave era, right? The U.S. government, the U.S. corporations, the slave owners, exported cotton. That's part of how Britain, got going with its textile industry, as it got cotton from the American South, picked by American slaves. That we used to export products. What changed with the rise of imperialism is that instead of exporting commodities or products, we export the corporations, right? Wherever you go in the world, for the most part, except for maybe North Korea, you're going to find McDonald's. McDonald's is a corporation, and it has been exported all over the world. ExxonMobil is a big oil company that does business all over the world. You go to Nigeria, you're going to find oil fields where the oil is being extracted by ExxonMobil, a Wall Street oil company. There, you go to Guyana, and there's going to be oil fields, and there's going to be oil that's being extracted and maintained by British Petroleum. Right? The corporation itself spreads all over the world. Instead of just selling the product, right? We're in America, maybe we have a lot of oil, so we export oil. No, the corporations based in America export themselves all over the world. This is called the export of capital. The corporation itself is the export, not the product it sells. The corporation is spreading itself all over the world, not the commodity. We're not selling commodities, we're exporting corporations. It's the export of capital. And so corporations that are tied in with big banks start going around the world and seizing markets for themselves. They want people to buy products from them. And they want to make sure they have sections of the world that buy products from them. And they don't want people buying products from somebody else. They want people buying products from them. And so sections of the world, they seize territorial partition as their captive market. When the British went to India, they wanted the Indian people to have to buy their textile, their cloth, from Britain. So when they got there, they burned all the looms down. And then the people of India were a captive market. They had to buy from the British corporations. What was Mahatma Gandhi, right? What was his big act of civil disobedience? What was it? Well, he went to the ocean and he got salt water and he boiled it to make his own salt. And he was arrested for doing that. Why? That was illegal under the rules of the British occupation of India. Because in India, you had to buy your salt from a British corporation. The salt of Britain, or the salt of India, was not allowed to be extracted. A private corporation owned the right, the monopoly on salt, and he was arrested for boiling salt water. That's what Gandhi was famous for doing. He would go around the world, and he would go around India, and he would boil salt water and get arrested for it because the British had said, in India, you have to buy your salt from British corporations. It was territorial partition. There's many examples of this. Many examples of this. Imperialism is the export of capital, these gigantic corporations going all over the world and using the world as a captive market. They prevent these countries from developing their own industries, from controlling their own natural resources, and the profits from the markets of these countries go into gigantic, mighty cities like the London Stock Exchange, like Wall Street, New York, like Frankfurt Financial District in Germany, like Paris has got a stock exchange, and that these big monopolistic corporations, they run the government, and the governments use them to seize sections of the world as their captive markets, as their territory. And then the governments go to war to redivide the world. And that's what World War I was. Big sections of Africa were controlled by the French. Big sections of Africa were controlled by the Belgians. Big sections of Africa were controlled by the Germans. Big sections of the Middle East were controlled by the Turks. Big sections of the world were controlled by the British. And so the Austrians and the Germans and the Turks went to war with the British and the Americans and the French, fighting over the colonized world about what sections of the world would be their captive market. This is not colonialism. This is imperialism. This is an economic system. They wanted the profits from the global market to go into their pockets, but there were sections of the world where the profits were going into other people's pockets. So France and Germany and Britain and the United States and Belgium and Turkey, they all went to war with each other over trying to redivide the world of who got to soak in the profits from around the world. And this is very, very important because of the fact that many people, and this is infuriating to me, and I must repeat this over and over and over again, that imperialism is not about development. Imperialism is about holding back development. And that is what people don't understand, right? Have you ever seen the movie Avatar? You ever seen the movie Dances with Wolves? There was an awful movie made during Donald Trump's first term in office called Beatrice at Dinner with Selma Hayek. There is this weird hippie narrative that imperialism is bringing electricity, and it's bringing education, and it's bringing, it's bringing modern technology. And imperialism is bad because these beautiful primitive people, these beautiful, Africans living in tribal conditions and, in the Sahara or whatever, these beautiful indigenous people living in parts of Guatemala that are not electrified. They're living in this beautiful state of nature where the evil white man with his modern electrification and his modern running water and his modern cell phones is like taking them out of their natural beauty. And that's what imperialism is. And that's not what imperialism is. That's some kind of weird hippy-dippy fantasy. That has nothing to do with what imperialism is. There are big sections of the world that don't have running water. There are big sections of the world that don't have electricity. There are big sections of the world where they don't have access to modern plumbing and they don't have education. And you know why that is? That's because of imperialism. Imperialism keeps countries in poverty. It doesn't bring development. It holds back development. Okay? That is what you need to understand. Under Gaddafi, Libya became a fully industrialized country. It wasn't until they had an anti-imperialist revolution and an Islamic socialist named Gaddafi took control of Libya and seized control of its oil resources that Libya had a modern electrical system and electrified the entire country. It wasn't until Gaddafi showed up and took control of the oil resources that Libya had a modern educational system, right? Libya had been occupied by the Italians. It had been a colony of Italy. And the people living there had remained poor. And the Italians had been happy to take their oil, but most of the country was fully deindustrialized, and it was living in extreme poverty, malnutrition, etc. And it wasn't until they had an anti-colonial revolution that Libya became fully industrialized. Nigeria is a great example. Nigeria is an African country that is the top exporter of oil on the African continent. There is no country in Africa that sells more oil than Nigeria. And in Nigeria, the life expectancy is quite low, and the rate of literacy is quite low, and the infant mortality rate is very high. And many people living in Nigeria do not have electricity in their homes, do not have running water, and live in very extreme conditions. Many children in Nigeria do not go to school and never learn to read and write. And that's because they're under the domination of BP and Shell and Chevron and ExxonMobil. BP, Shell, and Chevron are not showing up in Nigeria and giving electrification. They're not showing up in Nigeria and building schools to teach people. No. They show up in Nigeria and they extract the oil. And they electrify only to the extent that they need to extract the oil. And they leave the population in utter, complete poverty. There's many examples of this, right? Guatemala has been under the domination of U.S. imperialism for a very long time. And to this day, there are sections of Guatemala where people don't speak Spanish. They speak indigenous languages, where people do not have running water, where people do not have electricity, where people live in very desperate conditions. And the United States has been dominating Guatemala for hundreds of years, but they've never dealt with this issue. Why? Because they're there to hold back development. That's the point, right? That's the point. And they, in 1953, Guatemala elected a guy named Jacobo Arbenz, who was trying to industrialize Guatemala. And the United Fruit Company was worried that they would seize their products. And so the CIA overthrew them, and there were a string of military dictators who were in power, and they kept Guatemala underdeveloped. And there's many examples of this. There's big sections of Colombia where the people live in extreme poverty and are underdeveloped. Why? Because Colombia's government is a puppet of the United States and has kept them in underdevelopment. And I mean, there's many examples, right? The century of humiliation that China was subjected to, right? China, it fought 2 opium wars. What were those wars? Well, the British wanted to control China's market, and the emperor of China didn't want them to have control. And one way that the British were able to control China's market was by importing opium, a drug that destroys people, a very addictive drug that destroys people. Well, the emperor saw that the British were bringing in this drug called opium, and Chinese people were getting addicted and destroyed by this drug. So he outlawed the importing of opium. So the British Empire waged an opium war. And what was that opium war? It was to force the Chinese government to lift its ban on importing opium and lift its ban on, and essentially to force China to be under the domination of British corporations and banks. There's one of the biggest banks on Wall Street is called HSBC Bank. What does HSBC stand for? It stands for Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation. So it must be a Chinese bank. Well, if that's what you think, you are wrong. It is not a Chinese bank. It is not a Chinese bank. It is a British bank. And that British bank, Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation, is a bank that was set up to dominate China's economy, largely with drugs. And when the British were dominating China's economy from the 1800s all the way up until the Chinese Revolution of 1949, China was deeply, deeply poor. And the only reason China is now the second largest economy in the world is because they broke out of imperialism. Imperialism does not bring development. If there's any lie that I have constantly been told about, and it's everywhere, and it is pervasive and it is wrong, it's this idea that imperialism brings development, and it does not. The Western corporations and monopolies, when they go into a country, they do not bring development. They prevent the country from rising from poverty. They prevent the country from building up its own industries, from electrifying, from industrializing, from wiping out illiteracy, from, having modern living conditions. Imperialism does not bring development. The Western corporations and monopolies, their main function is holding back development around the world so that they can maintain their monopoly. They don't want countries in Africa to develop their industry and develop their own cell phone company. They want all the people in that country who want a cell phone to have to buy it from Verizon or buy it from Apple or buy it from an American company. They don't want people in Africa to develop their own steel industry and start making their own steel. Why? They want them to buy their steel from American steel manufacturers and U.S. steel corporations. That's why, right? They don't want, countries in South America to seize control of their own oil resources and start getting rich from selling their own oil. They want countries in South America to have to import their oil from American oil companies, or they want the oil in those countries to be the property de facto of American oil companies. Imperialism is about holding back development. Why? So that a monopoly can be maintained. Imperialism is monopolistic capitalism. It is a stage of capitalism where the wealth has concentrated in the hands of a few major corporations, and those major corporations have centered themselves around big banks, and the government has interwoven itself with those big corporations, and the government and the corporations and the banks are teamed up, and they're trying to seize the whole world for themselves and make the world poorer and poorer and poorer so that all the wealth from around the world ends up in their hands. It is monopolistic capitalism. That is what imperialism is. And this is so important to understand. And there's so few people who get this. Imperialism is not a policy. It is not a policy. It's not invading a country. Countries have been invading each other since the beginning of time, right? That if another country seizes a territory, that's called colonialism or annexation. But imperialism is an economic system. That is what imperialism is. Imperialism is an economic system. And what is the result of this economic system called imperialism? It is holding back development. That is what imperialism is. And this is what the first source, the first understanding of it that I would point to would be Henry Charles Carey and his writing about the English system versus the American system. The second and the most widespread is Lenin, because Lenin's understanding of imperialism gave birth to the Russian Revolution. And what did they do right after the Russian Revolution? And after the Russian Revolution, they convened the Congress of the Peoples of the East in Baku. Baku is a city in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is, a country that was part of the Russian Empire. It was part of the Soviet Union. After the Russian Revolution, Lenin and the Bolsheviks, they had a conference in Azerbaijan. And at that conference, they announced that they would support anyone who was fighting imperialism. Anybody. If you were fighting imperialism, they would support you. And it was called the Congress of the Peoples of the East in Baku. And they gathered all kinds of people from China, from Africa, from Asia, from all kinds of different places. And they said, are you ready to fight the imperialists? Are you ready to fight imperialism? All right, well, we support you. One of the people that the Bolsheviks supported, and I often reference this because it's very important, was the Emir of Afghanistan. The Emir of Afghanistan was a conservative monarchist. He was definitely not a communist. He believed in an absolute monarchy. He was a very strict religious Muslim, and he believed in an absolute monarchy. But in Afghanistan, the British were the occupier, the colonizer, and the Emir of Afghanistan did not want the British to run Afghanistan. And so he built a very conservative Muslim army, and he fought against the British Empire. And the Bolsheviks supported him. Why? Why did the Bolsheviks support the Emir of Afghanistan? Because he was fighting imperialism. And fighting imperialism is the road to development. Imperialism is holding back development. It is keeping people in poverty. It's keeping people from having electricity. It's keeping people from having access to healthcare. It's keeping people from having a lower infant mortality rate. It's keeping roads from being paved. It's keeping electrification from happening. It's keeping people in poverty. And defeating imperialism is the road to economic development. So the communists of Britain, the communists of the Soviet Union, they said, we will support anybody who is fighting imperialism. And that was very, very important. That was the basis of Leninism. And furthermore, Lenin said, if you support imperialism, you can call yourself a socialist. You can advocate for the rights of workers. You can advocate for guaranteed health care or guaranteed kindergartens for kids. But if you are supporting imperialism, you're not really against capitalism, because capitalism in our modern time is imperialism. And the fight in the world is the fight against imperialism. And what Lenin wrote that was so important was that you couldn't have imperialism. This is a really hard thing for people to understand. This is really, really important. You could not have imperialism without fake socialism. Let me repeat that. You cannot have imperialism without fake socialism. That's something that's very, very hard for people to understand. But in Lenin's great book, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, as quoted in We Are City Builders, our textbook, he talks about Cecil Rhodes. And who is Cecil Rhodes? Cecil Rhodes was one of the great colonizers of Africa. He was a British imperialist. And Zimbabwe, before it became independent, was called Rhodesia after Cecil Rhodes. He seized a chunk of Africa and he named it after himself. And he killed millions of African people. The British settlers would go to Africa and just gun down entire villages. And they extracted the rubber from Africa, and they extracted minerals and diamonds from Africa. They got the resources, and British corporations dominated Africa. South Africa, the apartheid state of South Africa, was set up by the British Empire. Rhodesia was set up by the British Empire. Cecil Rhodes, a British imperialist, set up Rhodesia. And I'm going to read to you, this is quoted by Vladimir Lenin in his book, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. He quotes Cecil Rhodes, the founder of Rhodesia. These are actual quotes from Cecil Rhodes. Hold on, just got to find what page it's on. Here we go. In 1895, Cecil Rhodes is quoted as saying this: "I was in the East End of London yesterday." That's a little more Cockney. "I was in the East End of London yesterday, a working class quarter, and I attended a meeting of the unemployed, and I listened to their wild speeches, which were just a cry for bread, bread, bread. And on my way home, I pondered the scene, and I became ever more convinced of the importance of imperialism. My cherished idea is the solution for a social problem. In order to save the 40 million inhabitants of the United Kingdom from bloody civil war, we colonial statesmen must acquire new lands to settle the surplus population, to provide new markets for the goods produced in the factories and the mines. The empire, as I have always said, is a bread and butter question. If you want to avoid a civil war, you must become imperialists." That was Cecil Rhodes, the founder of Rhodesia. And he said that the way to prevent a working class revolution in Britain was to build an empire. And it was very, very blatant that in Britain, the working class people were mad they didn't have jobs, and they were protesting and rioting, and they were setting up labor unions, they were forming socialist groups. And if they didn't become imperialists, there was going to be a civil war. And so what is the purpose of imperialism? What did Cecil Rhodes say the purpose of imperialism was? What was it supposed to do? Let's get to it. Imperialism was supposed to, what did he say? Settle the surplus population, right? Because the factories, they didn't have enough jobs for people in Britain because of technology, because technology was eliminating jobs. And there were all these British people who didn't have a place at the assembly line. So what do? They send them to Africa. They send them to China. They send them to places to be overseers with whips to whip the colonial slaves in the mine, or to, set up farms, or to oversee the role of corporations around the world. And what else? To provide new markets for the goods produced in the factories and the mines. What is that? Well, the British working class didn't have enough money to buy the products. They couldn't buy all the textile that was being produced because they didn't have jobs. They couldn't buy the various products they were creating. And it's the classic problem of capitalism. More goods are created than there are wages paid out to buy them. And so when you have a market that's glutted with products that cannot be sold, when you have a whole bunch of unemployed people that have no place at the assembly line, how do you resolve the crisis? You seize a big chunk of the world and you make it buy your products, and then you take those unemployed people and you send them there to be settlers and colonial overseers. The way to prevent a civil war in Britain, to prevent socialist revolution, was to become an imperialist country. That's what Cecil Rhodes understood. This is from the mouth of an actual British imperialist. And Cecil Rhodes, he was Mr. British imperialism. You ever heard of the Rhodes Scholar Program that Bill Clinton did, that Rachel Maddow did, that like half of the U.S. Congress did? That's from Rhodesia. That's from Cecil Rhodes. That's from him. It's the Rhodes Scholar Program. And that this was how they prevented a socialist revolution from happening in the West, is they spread their monopolies all over the world, and that gave them enough super profits that they could divide the working class at home. And fake socialists who preached socialism while supporting imperialism were essential to making it happen. And you'll notice that, a lot of people think that the first national healthcare service that was ever created was created in Britain after World War II. And that's not true. The first national healthcare service that was ever created was created before World War I by the German Kaiser. And why? Why did he create it? Well, first of all, there was a big socialist movement in Germany that was going around and saying, healthcare, we should have the right to healthcare. And then the Kaiser realized that if he was going to build an army of people that could conquer big chunks of the world and beat back the British so the Germans could have their own empire, he needed healthy people. And so the socialist movement, instead of fighting for socialism, it was kind of fighting to make German imperialism more efficient and the result was they created a national healthcare service, and they created free healthcare in Germany. Why is it that before you go to first grade in America, you go to kindergarten? Why is that? This is America, right? You know, in America, we speak English, but, you know, before first grade, you go to kindergarten. Why do you go to kindergarten? Why? Why do you go to kindergarten? Why don't they call it, why don't they call it the grade before first grade? Why do you go to kindergarten? Well, that's because Germany was rising as a country, and there was a great big socialist movement in Germany that was demanding daycare for kids. And the German Kaiser said, you know what? If we have schools, we have public education, all the kids will learn how to march in line, and they'll get political indoctrination and be taught from the time that they're little kids that they need to serve the German fatherland. And so the German socialist movement that was supposed to be fighting against capitalism protested and demanded the creation of public education. And the German Kaiser said, you know what? Works for me. And they created kindergarten. They created kindergarten, public education. And you can read articles in the American newspapers in the lead up to World War I. And those articles, what did they say? They said that we need to set up public education in America because the German Kaiser has public education. And if there's a war, he's going to beat us in the war because his kids are marching in line and they're getting political education and military training, from the time they're kids. And our kids, they don't go to school because we don't provide that service. And that socialism was supposed to be a movement to overthrow capitalism. But it was gradually turning into a movement that was about getting the government involved so that imperialism, that capitalism could function more effectively and move toward the stage of imperialism. And that's what Lenin was understanding. He's saying, look, all these socialist groups, they're supposed to be fighting the capitalists. And actually what they're doing is they're kind of helping the capitalist system tweak itself and adjust itself so it can be a more effective imperialist system. And that all over Europe in the lead up to World War I, there were huge socialist groups. The Social Democratic Party of Germany was the biggest Marxist socialist party in the world. It had millions of people that were in it. The SPD or the SDP of Germany, the Social Democratic Party of Germany, was a huge political organization, right? In Britain, you had the Labour Party. And they're the ruling party of Britain. Keir Starmer, that's his party. You had the French socialist groups, and the socialists were everywhere, and labor unions were being formed, and they were creating public education, and they were creating national healthcare services, and they were passing 8-hour workday laws. And a lot of these socialist leaders were starting to say things like, well, a revolution isn't really necessary. And that was a very, very common strand of thinking. There was a guy named Edward Bernstein. And Edward Bernstein said that Western capitalism was just naturally turning into socialism. He said, the movement is everything. The goal is nothing. And that socialism is just the sum of reforms. And that gradually, one step at a time, the Western imperialist countries were gradually turning into socialist countries. One step at a time. Socialism was just the sum of reforms. And this was the prevailing view. Now, Karl Kautsky was the main leader of Marxism in Europe, and he disagreed with Edward Bernstein, and he preached a much more revolutionary-sounding message. And before World War I, all the big socialist groups in Europe, they met, they had a convention, and they all pledged they would never support a war. They would never support an imperialist war. And then August of 1914, World War I broke out. And all of them changed their minds. All of them. All the socialist groups, all the major socialist groups of Europe flipped. And they all supported the war. And the Germans, they supported the war. And the French, they supported the war. And the British, they supported the war. And all the big socialists said, whoops, and they changed their minds. And they supported World War I. And at that moment, Lenin said there's something inherently wrong with the standard Marxist theory. These socialist parties are not socialists. They are social imperialists. They may preach socialism. They preach about workers' rights, but they're just doing it as a mechanism for stabilizing capitalism as it moves towards this stage of imperialism, dominating the world markets. imperialism the highest stage of capitalism. And Lenin said, people around the world that are fighting against imperialism, even if they're not socialists or communists, even if they're capitalists, even if they're monarchists and feudalists, they're good because imperialism is the main danger to humanity. And this is a huge breakthrough that Lenin had, this understanding that imperialism is the main danger and that national liberation, the struggle of nations to fight against imperialism, was a good thing. Before that, Marxists had said, no, workers of the world unite. We don't believe in countries. We don't believe in nations. We just believe in class. But Marx, even in the final years of his life, started to question that. He started supporting the Polish people as they were asserting their national independence. And he also started supporting the Irish national liberation struggle. In fact, Karl Marx's daughter, Jenny Marx, became a big supporter of the Irish national liberation struggle. So much so, Jenny Marx was an atheist, and she was of Jewish descent, right? Karl Marx was of Jewish heritage, and Jenny, his daughter, she was an atheist like Karl Marx was. But because they lived in Britain and they saw that the struggle of the Irish people against the domination of British and English corporations, that was an essential thing. So Jenny Marx started wearing a crucifix around her neck, even though she was not a Christian, even though she was definitely not a Catholic Christian. She was an atheist of Jewish heritage, but she wore a crucifix around her neck because the Irish people were being colonized and oppressed because they were Catholic. And so to show support for the Irish Catholics, she wore a crucifix around her neck. And she was heavily involved in protesting on behalf of the Irish people. And so she wore a crucifix. There's even a photograph of Jenny Marx standing next to her dad, Karl Marx, wearing a crucifix around her neck. I'll pull up the picture. I'll pull it up, right? But yeah, this is the picture. This is Jenny Marx, and you will see she was not a Christian. She was an atheist. She was an adherent of her dad's atheistic communist ideas. But she was heavily involved in fighting for the Irish people against the British. And she understood that the main contradiction in Britain at that time was the fight between the Irish nation that was Roman Catholic and the British Empire that was Protestant and was trying to oppress them. So there's Jenny Marx, Karl Marx's daughter, with a crucifix around her neck because she supported the national liberation movement of the Irish people. So even in the final years of Marx's life, when he got to be an old guy, he was starting to get it. But it's Lenin who comes forward and he says movements of national liberation against imperialism are progressive. And that eventually all these movements of national liberation are going to kind of sort of have to become socialist movements. That's what he says. Basically, if you're fighting the imperialists, the only way you're going to be able to set up an economy the imperialists don't control is you're going to have a planned economy where profits are not in command. And so basically all these people that are fighting against imperialism, they're going to have to eventually set up a socialist society. And furthermore, he says that if you're on the side of the imperialists, like the British Labour Party, like the German Social Democratic Party, like the French socialist groups, if you're on the side of the imperialists and you call yourself a socialist, it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter. You can call yourself whatever you want. If you're on the side of the imperialists, you are defending monopoly capitalism and you are not a socialist. And that Leninism, and this is very important, Marxism-Leninism is not about the workers and the bosses, right? All this worker co-op bullshit. Oh, Marx, all that Marx ever wrote was that there's people who work in the factory and there's people who own the factory, and that's not fair, and the workers should own the factory to get... That's outdated. That's outdated. Lenin said, nope, it's not about workers in the factory versus the guy who owns the factory. That's not what it's about. It's about imperialism, the bankers and the ultra monopolies of the Western countries dominating the entire world, and nations fighting to break free from imperialism. This is Lenin. So basically the same thing that Henry Charles Carey said, the American system versus the English system. Well, that English system came to be the dominant economic form in the world, and Lenin comes along and he says, fighting that system, imperialist, monopolistic capitalism, That is the main focus, and it will be entire nations fighting to break free. But the only way these nations can break free from the domination of Western capitalism and monopolistic imperialism, the only way they can break free from it is by moving toward a planned economy. And that brings me to something that you all should understand, because I have said at this point, I'm not against capitalism as people understand it. I'm against imperialism, right? If you own your own store, I'm not against that. I'm not against someone owning a restaurant or a bar. I'm not against someone having a new idea in the tech field. I'm not against that. I'm not against any of that. I am against the rule of the world by big banks and corporations that hold back development. And I'm going to show you something. I'm going to show you the flag of China. You should understand this. This is rather important. Let me find an image I can put on the screen at proper size. Hold on. The flag of China. Trying to find a version that I can show and it'll blow up to full size on the screen for me. All right. Hold on. There we go. All right. The flag of China. 1 second. Got to close the other two so I don't accidentally put them on the screen. Okay. All right. Hold on. All right. This is the flag of China. What do those stars on the flag of China stand for? Well, the big star stands for the Chinese Communist Party. But what do the four little stars stand for? Well, one of those stars stands for the peasantry, the farmers. They were the majority of China at the time of the revolution. Another one of those stars stands for the factory workers, the wage workers, the proletariat. Another one of those stars stands for the merchants, the small business owners of China. But Caleb, they're capitalists. Are you saying that the Chinese Communist Party supported capitalists? Yes, I am. One of those stars stands for the merchants. And in fact, another one of those stars stands for the national capitalists, the national bourgeoisie. There's one star for the small shopkeepers and merchants, and there's another star for the national bourgeoisie. But Caleb, you must be an idiot. Karl Marx said it was workers versus capitalists. We don't support any capitalists. You must be retarded. You don't know anything about communism. Actually, yes, I do. Yes, I do. Why is it that on the Chinese flag, they have one star for the peasants, one star for the workers, one star for the urban merchants, and one star for the national capitalists? Why would a communist government have a star for capitalists? In fact, two stars for capitalists, one for small business owners and merchants, and the other for national capitalists. Why? Why would that be, Caleb? Didn't you listen to Richard Wolff? Don't you know? You must be an idiot. Everybody knows that communism is against capitalists, so no communist government would ever have a capitalist flag. Folks, why is it that on the Chinese flag they have a star for the workers, a star for the peasants, a star for the merchants, and a star for the national capitalists? Why? Because the Chinese Revolution was a revolution against imperialism, and it was a fight of national liberation against the imperialists. The Chinese Communist Party, with its Marxist-Leninist ideology, fought for the national liberation of the Chinese nation against the imperialists. And it was a block of four great classes: the workers, the peasants, the small business owners and merchants, and the national capitalists, who were unified by the Chinese Communist Party to defeat the imperialists. The block of four great classes under the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. Because Leninism says it's not a fight between the workers and the bosses, it's a fight against the imperialists, and that there are many small business owners who benefit from the fight against the imperialists. There are many peasants who benefit from the fight against the imperialists. There are even many national capitalists, millionaires and billionaires, who benefit from the fight against the imperialists. The fight in our time is the fight against imperialism. And That's what the Chinese flag stands for. And that's what Vladimir Lenin wrote about. And that's why the Cold War happened. And that this is essential. So if you want to understand imperialism, the way New Yorker magazine or The Economist magazine does not understand it, you want to understand what imperialism is, first look at Henry Charles Carey, the English system versus the American system. Then look at Lenin, imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. And now I will bring you to the third way that you can understand imperialism. And the third way that you can understand imperialism is a new school of thought. It's not new. It's been around for a while, but it's newly popular. In the last 20, 30 years, there's been a rising interest in China and in Russia in what they call geopolitics. What is geopolitics? Geopolitics is the understanding that politics, systems of government, can be influenced by land, right? Geo means land. Politics means system of government. And geopolitics is how geography or the land affects politics. During the Cold War, you had Marxism, Leninism, the Soviet Union, China, North Korea, Cuba, the Eastern Bloc, various governments that were anti-imperialist. And they believed in communism. And you had the United States and its allies, and they believed in capitalism. And that was the Cold War. But geopolitics says it's actually a lot deeper than that. Geopolitics says that if you look at the history of civilization for thousands of years, there are two different types of civilizations. There are thalassocracies, which are empires of the sea, and there are telerocracies, empires of the land. And this is where it's very, very important, because I told you people don't understand imperialism. A lot of people say to me, well, Caleb, don't you know there's a lot of Russian thinkers like your buddy Alexander Dugin? I mean, I met him one time, but, you know, who they believe in creating a Russian empire. So if you support Russia, you're not anti-imperialist. No, they are talking about something different. You go back thousands of years, there are two different types of civilizations. You look at the Roman Empire. Where was the Roman Empire based? The Roman Empire was based on the Italian peninsula. And the Roman Empire, at least at the beginning, did not have an emperor. It had an elected national assembly and a hereditary senate. And why did the Roman Empire not have an emperor at the beginning? Why did it have a republic at the beginning? Because all the landowners of the city of Rome wanted to have a share in the empire. And if they just had one king, then people wouldn't fight as hard. But Rome, with its mighty army and its mighty navy that was seizing control of the modern world, Rome needed all the landowning families to feel like they had a seat at the table, like they had a say in how the empire was run. And so all the wealthy families of Rome, they were part of the hereditary senate, and they got one vote. And then they had a national assembly, and all the landowners, who maybe some of them weren't in the senate, they got to vote and elect leaders. And that in order to make all of the wealthy people in Rome, all the landowners in Rome, feel like they got a say in how the loot was divided up, they had a republic, an elected government, because it was an empire that was all about building up a mighty army and controlling the trade routes. It was a sea-based empire. In Rome, they had a mighty navy that prayed to the god Neptune, the god of the ocean. They had huge warships, and those warships controlled the trade routes. There was an expression, all roads lead to Rome. What did that mean? It meant that you were not allowed to build a road. If you were in Persia and you built a road into Palestine, they would come and kill you, because the only people that were allowed to build roads were the Romans, and the only people that were allowed to sail ships were the Romans. And if you didn't have permission from the Romans to sail a ship, They, with their mighty navy, they would, light your ship on fire and burn it down. They controlled the trade routes so that all of the wealth of the modern world flowed into one mighty city. Is this sounding familiar? One mighty city. It wasn't the Italian Empire, it was the Roman Empire. There was one city that all the wealth of the modern world was concentrated in. And in those cities, there were many different wealthy families, and they all voted in their Senate and their National Assembly about how the loot got divided. And they built up this mighty military that went all over North Africa and all over France and Germany and even up into Britain and into the Middle East. And they controlled the whole modern world, and they extracted wealth, and it all went into one mighty city. This is thalassocracy. This is a sea-based empire. This is the English system. This is imperialism. This is a very early, primitive form of the economic system we have today, where one mighty empire, one mighty city controls the trade routes, coins money. That was another thing the Romans did, is they had currency. They stamped the face of the emperor on coins. They coined their own currency. They had bankers, and they dominated the world. And why did Rome eventually fall? Because they stopped being loyal to each other. There was no unifying principle. They became more and more individualistic, and gradually the Roman Empire got to the point they couldn't even build their own army. They had to hire other people. When they were fighting the Germans, the Germanic tribes, the barbarians they called them, they couldn't even get together their own Roman army to go fight them. So they had to go up to Germany and find other Germans and pay them to fight the barbarians who were fighting them, right? And at the end, Rome was so individualistic and so divided. There was no central belief, no central principle and beliefs, that Rome fell apart. And Christianization, the Christianization of Rome, was an attempt to hold Rome together in the final stages of the empire, right? As Rome was falling, they adopted Christianity as their state religion to hold it together. Why? Because all the different Romans were praying to all their own gods. There was a god of the army, Mars. There was god of the navy, Neptune. There were people who worshipped Julius Caesar, who had died and they believed he became a god. There were people who worshipped Osiris, the god from Egypt. There were people who worshipped Mithra, the god from Iran. All the Romans were praying to different gods. They were all selfish and individualistic. They had no central vision or anything. And so as they were panicking, the Roman government said, all right, we're Christians now, and there's only one God. There's only one God. And that was an attempt to save their empire, to hold everyone together. And they said, we're Christians, and we're going to spread the message of Jesus Christ to every place that we're colonizing. We have one religion, but it didn't work. Rome came apart, right? Rome became more and more individualistic, less and less collectivist in its mindset, and their ability to raise a gigantic army completely deteriorated, and slavery becomes more and more inefficient the more slaves you get, right? That's a whole nother thing, right? And so gradually, as Rome became more and more individualistic and more not collective and more divided, and the rich became more and more decadent, and there were more and more visions, and it got to the point the Roman Empire just fell apart. And first it divided in half. You had the Byzantine, the Eastern Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire, and then eventually you had the empire in like modern France, and it just deteriorated, right? And the fall of the Roman Empire was the natural trajectory of this mode, this economic system. This is called thalassocracy, the sea-based empire. And in fact, Rosa Luxemburg, the great German socialist who opposed World War I, who was thrown in prison for opposing World War I, this is what she wrote at the time of World War I broke out. She wrote, "This world war is a regression into barbarism. The triumph of imperialism leads to the annihilation of civilization. At first, this happens sporadically for the duration of a modern war, but then, when the period of unlimited wars begins," do you hear this? The period of unlimited wars begins, it progresses toward its inevitable consequences. The triumph of imperialism and the collapse of all civilization, as in ancient Rome, depopulation, desolation, degeneration, a great cemetery. As Rosa Luxemburg is saying, basically Europe, as it adopts thalassocracy, the Roman economic system, the empire of the sea, it's going to become more and more individualistic, and it's going to rip apart, and it's eventually going to lead to barbarism, the fall of the Roman Empire, depopulation, desolation, a great cemetery. That's what Rosa Luxemburg was writing. However, if you look at the Russian Empire, you look at the Chinese Empire, you look at the Persian empires that existed, these are empires that are not based on the ocean. They're based on the land. And as a result of being based on the land, they have a very different relationship with the countries that they're absorbing into their empire. There's a movie you should all go watch. Came out during World War II. It's called Ivan the Terrible. Go and watch Ivan the Terrible, directed by Sergei Eisenstein. This film, Ivan the Terrible, is about one of the great czars of Russia. And you'd think, why is Stalin, during World War II, Stalin's a communist? Why is he making a movie about a great czar? Well, you watch this movie, Ivan the Terrible, and you'll understand. This movie, Ivan the Terrible, is about a great czar who united all the people of the Russian Empire. He got the Muslims, he got the Georgians, he got the Caucasians, he got all the Tatars, he got all these different people into one empire. And that's why he's viewed as great, because all the people, when they were united into one empire, roads were built, schools were created, education was created. I mean, it resulted in modernization. And if you watch the movie, Ivan the Terrible, it's a very Christian movie. And it was a really big deal when that movie came out during World War II because the church had been illegal in the Soviet Union. They'd been suppressing Christianity. But at the time they were being invaded by the Nazis, Stalin allowed for this very, very Christian movie with endless scenes of priests and prayers and big church windows and all kinds of Christian stuff in it. And it's about Ivan the Terrible, this czar who brought all of the peoples of the Russian Empire into one country and suffered and worked really, really hard. And what was the message of the film? We've got to stay together to defeat the invaders. We're better together than we are divided, because if we're together, our living standard can go up. We can increase, we can become a strong civilization if we're together. That was the message of the film. And during World War II, what were the Nazis doing? Well, the Nazis went to Ukraine and they said to Ukrainians, you know, you're Ukrainian, you're not Russian. Here, we'll help you defeat those Russians that are oppressing you. And they gave them guns. And they went to the Chechens. They said to the Chechens, you know, you are Muslims. Those Russians are historically Christian, and you're deeply religious Muslims, and they're communist atheists. So here's some guns. Go fight the Russians. And the Nazis were trying to divide the peoples of the Russian Empire. And so Stalin made this movie about the Russian Empire, saying we're stronger when we're together. And if we can be strong enough, we can come together. And if we come together, we can lift ourselves up economically. It's a very powerful film, but it's not about communism. It's about Eurasianism. It's a Eurasianist movie. He's saying that we have a different type of civilization here. This isn't the British Empire. This isn't the Roman Empire. This is a different type of civilization. And that when we are together, all the different nationalities, we can develop and pull ourselves up, and we're stronger together. It's a different type of empire. And why is it that in China, the Qing dynasty, this brutal authoritarian dynasty, is remembered? Why are they remembered and honored? Because they created one China. They brought together all of China. Why is it that people in China get really fired up about Taiwan? It's because The Chinese Communist Party says we brought all of China together because the way that China was kept poor during that century of humiliation, when the British beat down China with 2 opium wars, is they broke away Taiwan, they broke away Hong Kong, they broke away Tibet, and they separated China. And the Chinese Communist Party says if you look back for 5,000 years of civilization in China, it's when we're together that we start developing. When we're together, we have things like the first civil service exam that was ever invented. The first civil service examination ever created was in China. The first paper money ever created, paper currency, was in China. When they're together, they're growing. That's not the same as thalassocracy. That's not the same as the Roman Empire. It's an empire based on the land that is focused on development and unifying different nationalities on a great land mass. And you can say the same thing about the Persians, right? And King Cyrus and the Persians. And you could say that there are 2 types of civilization. There are 2 types of empires that exist. And modern imperialism, what Henry Charles Carey called Atlanticism, what Lenin called imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, moribund, decadent, monopolistic capitalism. And now what Alexander Dugin and a lot of different thinkers in Russia and in China and in Iran and other places are calling Atlanticism. That is one economic system. And that is what we were up against. Atlanticism. And if you look at the Roman Empire, how did it end up? What is the natural progression? Is that the Atlanticist system leads to more and more individualism, more and more selfishness. All the wealthy people are going in all different directions, chasing after their own wealth, and the society gradually deteriorates from within. Instead of being a society based on the land, where they're thinking, what's in the interest of our nation, they become a society that's committed to maintaining a global military to extract profits from all over the globe, to pile the wealth into one mighty city, where a group of rich people fight with each other over who gets the spoils. And from the interior of the empire, the whole thing pulls apart. That is the natural progression of thalassocracy, empire of the sea. However, I would maintain that America has always been caught up in a spiritual battle. And I read to you what Henry Charles Carey said about the American system versus the English system. And if you look at our Civil War, it was very much an uprising against the slave system, which was the stronghold of the British Empire and their source of cheap cotton in the U.S. South. And if you look at Roosevelt and how he built infrastructure all across the United States, and how he said to Winston Churchill, we will never again go to war to defend the British Empire, and how Roosevelt loved Stalin and hated Winston Churchill. He thought Winston Churchill was a lying scumbag, but he said, that's Stalin, I like that guy. There is a deep spiritual battle in America. Are we a people of the land or a people of the sea? What are we? Are we people of the land or people of the sea? That is the question. Are we an imperialist country or are we a land-based civilization state? Russia and China are civilization states. They're not nation states. There's many different nationalities in Russia, many different nationalities in China. But they are a civilization state on the land, focused on development, eradicating poverty, lifting people up, modernizing, connecting people with trade, elevating while equalizing the people of the world. That is what they're about. It sounds a lot like what Henry Charles Carey wrote about the American system. It also sounds a lot like what Lenin and Stalin said about communism, right? That we're going to centrally plan the means of production, and we're going to go build gigantic projects, 5-year economic plans, build giant power plants, and we're going to build up and electrify. It sounds like what Henry Charles Carey said. about the American system, building the lighthouses, creating a national bank, building up and causing the population to expand and growing the population on the land. Sounds like Henry Charles Carey, but it also sounds like Stalin. And it also sounds like Putin. And it also sounds like Xi Jinping, the Chinese Communist Party, lifting 800 million people out of poverty. Atlanticism, imperialism, the English system is on one side. The American system and the ideals of the American Revolution, and socialism and communism as Stalin and Mao and Deng Xiaoping understood it, and Eurasianism or continentalism are on the other side. This is a deep spiritual battle that is waging. And it is way, way, way deeper. So much deeper than capitalism versus communism. Capitalism versus communism is like one episode in the war. It's like one episode in a Netflix miniseries that is 50 episodes long. And capitalism versus communism in the Cold War was one episode in the fight. And even communism had to change, right? Marx's communism set up social democracy, which became a vehicle for creating imperialism. Trotskyism, permanent revolution, that was also a Western thing. And Trotskyite groups worked with the CIA at this point to fight against communist governments. And Stalin, when he adopted his form of communism, he adopted a bunch of Eurasianist principles, right? If you look at Lenin, the pictures of Lenin they had all over the Soviet Union, he's got a halo around his head. Why is that? That was an Orthodox tradition, the tradition of Orthodox icons. Why is it communist governments are always marching around with big pictures of Stalin's head, big pictures of Mao's head, big pictures of Kim Il-sung's head? That comes from the Orthodox tradition of icons. That comes from the Eastern tradition of ancestor worship. Praying to your ancestors, praying to the spirit of a dead person, drawing strength from an icon that you admire. This is an Eastern tradition. This is a Eurasianist tradition. Whereas individualism and acquiring a huge amount of wealth and saying you have no country, you have no nation. I'm telling you, this is all very, very deep. There is a deep spiritual battle that is going on. But in my view, at this point, you can, like I said, you can call yourself anything you want. You can call yourself a Christian and support imperialism. You can call yourself a Christian and be against it. You can call yourself a Muslim and support imperialism. You can call yourself a Muslim and be against it. You can call yourself a communist and support imperialism. In fact, the overwhelming majority of American communists do. Or you can call yourself a communist and oppose imperialism, like the great Harpal Brar, who just passed, did. Right? It's you can wear whatever clothes and whatever ideology you want. There's a fundamental divide in the world right now. And we in America are caught in the middle of it. Because we as a nation have always had a side of us that is people of the land. And we've always had a side of us that is people of the sea and imperialist. And we are caught up in a spiritual battle. And if you look at the greatest moments in American history, that's when we become people of the land. John Brown, building that movement to oppose slavery. Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Horace Greeley, go west, young man, and grow up with the country. Westward leading, still proceeding, guide us to the perfect light. If you look at the Second World War and the Flint sit-down strike in Michigan and the Teamsters strike in Minneapolis and the Farmer Labor Party of Minnesota and the Southern Sharecroppers strikes and the IWW and the Wobblies, if you look at American history, all the good parts of American history, the abolitionists, the free soilers, the Black Liberation Movement, the labor unionists, those are people of the land. And if you look at all the evil things in American history, slavery, British Empire, that's what slavery was. Genocide of Native Americans, British Empire, that's what that was. Malthusianism, eugenics, breeding people like people, that's British Empire, that's what that is. Free markets, screw you, you're on your own, I don't care about you, poor people can just rot, that's British Empire. Social Darwinism, survival of the fittest, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, British Empire. All the evil things in American history flow from the English system, imperialism, Atlanticism, civilization of the sea. All the good things in American history flow from civilization of the land, people of the land, continentalism, collectivism, socialism, Christianity. There is a deep divide deep within our bones. What kind of people are we going to be? Are we going to be people of the land or people of the sea? Are we going to be an Atlanticist society or a continental society? Are we going to be an imperialist country? Or are we going to be a country with a government of action that fights for working families? This is a deeply spiritual question. And my beginning of it was understanding it in terms of capitalism versus communism. But I think you can ask the question, optimism or pessimism. The British Empire says there's too many people in the world. The imperialists at the World Economic Forum, they say there's too many people in the world. They say we need to reduce the population. There's too many people in the world. There's limited resources. The world needs to stay poor. We need to stop development. And in China, they say, nope, we're building, we're constructing. In Russia, they say, we're building, we're constructing. In Africa, the countries that have broken free in West Africa, Mali, Niger, they say, we're constructing, we're building. Nicaragua, they say, we're constructing, we're building. Christianity, socialism, and solidarity. Grow where you are planted. Start your own business, micro-entrepreneurship. There is a growth-oriented economy, and there is a monopolistic-oriented economy that is trying to stop growth. I'm telling you, there's a deep spiritual battle in the world, and America is ground zero. There's a coming war in America. There's a coming fight in America. There's a deep battle within the American spirit. What type of people are we going to be? It's the Civil War all over again. It's Roosevelt versus the business plot all over again. It's a spiritual battle. What kind of civilization are we going to be? And it's not about Donald Trump. And it's not about Kamala Harris. And it's not about individuals and personalities. It's about deep sentiments within our souls. It's about ideas. It's about spiritual concepts. It's about our relationship with our community, our relationship with each other, our relationship with nature, our relationship with the world. And Donald Trump has said a lot of things I don't agree with. There was one moment, and I'm just going to show you this. The fact that Donald Trump said all that he said in this video. This is a very short speech that Donald Trump gave after he left office. You watch this speech, listen to everything he says in this speech. It's not that Donald Trump is a good guy because he said this. It's because the people rallying behind Donald Trump want to hear this. That Donald Trump is tapping into a part of the American spirit that wants this.
Past generations of Americans pursued big dreams and daring projects that once seemed absolutely impossible. They pushed across an unsettled continent and built new cities in the wild frontier. They transformed American life with the interstate highway system. Magnificent it was. And they launched a vast network of satellites into orbit all around the earth. But today, our country has lost its boldness. Under my leadership, we will get it back in a very big way. If you look at just 3 years ago, what we were doing was unthinkable. How good it was, how great it was for our country. Our objective will be a quantum leap in the American standard of living. That's what will happen. Here are just a few of the ways we can do it. Almost 1/3 of the land mass of the United States is owned by the federal government, with just a very, very small portion of that land, just a fraction, 1/2 of 1%. Would you believe that? We should hold a contest to charter up to 10 new cities and award them to the best proposals for development. In other words, we'll actually build new cities in our country again. These freedom cities will reopen the frontier, reignite American imagination, and give hundreds of thousands of young people and other people, all hardworking families, a new shot at home ownership and, in fact, the American dream. Another big opportunity is in transportation. Dozens of major companies in the United States and China are racing to develop vertical takeoff and landing vehicles for families and individuals. Just as the United States led the automotive revolution in the last century, I want to ensure that America, not China, leads this revolution in air mobility. These breakthroughs can transform commerce, bring a giant infusion of wealth into rural America, and connect families in our country in new ways. Likewise, through our Strategic National Manufacturing Initiative, which is going to be very big and very, very successful, we will turn forgotten communities into hives of industry, producing the goods we will no longer import from China. We will also have a major initiative on lowering the cost of living with a special focus on lowering the cost of a new car and lowering the cost to build a single-family home. And they will be beautiful homes. And I will ask Congress to support baby bonuses for young parents to help launch a new baby boom. Finally, I'll challenge the governors of all 50 states to join me in a great modernization and beautification campaign, getting rid of ugly buildings, refurbishing our parks and our public spaces, making cities and towns more livable, ensuring a pristine environment, and building towering monuments to our true American heroes. Very importantly, I will also make sure all of these new places are safe. We love and cherish our police. They will do the job the way they have to. It is time to start talking about greatness for our country again. I will dramatically increase living standards and build a future that brings our country together through excitement, opportunity, and success. Thank you very much.
That was the best speech Donald Trump ever gave, in my view. And that's not representative of everything Trump stands for. That speech, he said many things that are contradictory to that. But whoever wrote that speech understands that that is something deep within the American soul. We want growth. We want development. We want to see the population increase. We want to, have new cities rise up across the vast territory of the country. That's what we want. So that's what I want to talk to you all about tonight. Ukraine aid is frozen. And I'm very excited about that. And I hope that means that the new administration can negotiate with Russia and that we can end this war in Ukraine once and for all. And I hope that it means that things can start to change. I'm very optimistic. I struggle to be optimistic because I believe it is my duty to my friends, to my family, to my comrades in the organization, and to the world and to the country. It is our duty to be optimistic. We must expect the best. We must expect the best from the world. We must be optimistic at all times. We must be doing our best to struggle and sacrifice to make the world a better place, to have a positive view of fellow human beings, expect the best from them, and demand the best from ourselves. So on that note, folks, why don't we do the roll call? Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. And then I'm going to start answering super chats. I have 2 super chats so far, but please send more because I can be on here for at least 2 more hours. I got 2 more hours in me. So send more super chats and get me talking. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Who's with us? Mark Jones in Utica, New York. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. JT24 in Mississippi. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Bob in Troy, New York. Brad in Cleveland. Bendigo, Australia. David Fox. St. David's, Bermuda. Anthony in Detroit. Scott in Maryland. Phil in Miami, Florida. Ian Chester in England. Joe in Los Angeles. Philip in Scablands, Auckland, New Zealand, Joe in Durham, North Carolina, Matt in Lansing, Michigan, Darknays in Germany, Hempgar in Wisconsin. Good to have you with us. Good to have you with us. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. John McCarthy in Chicago. Names and locations. Good to have you, John. Good to have you with us, John. Balthazar in Oakland. Good to have you with us. April and Chris in Salt Lake City. Good to have you with us. Good to have you with us. Names and locations. Names and locations. Alex in Brazil. Welcome, Alex. Good to have you with us. Dahe in Seattle. Welcome, Dahe. Good to have you as well. Names and locations. Names and locations. Seasoned Noob in China. Good to have you with us. Good to have you with us. Courtney in Northern Virginia. Good to have you as well, Courtney. Names and locations. Names and locations. Mr. Wonderful from Quanos. Good to have you with us. This is the roll call part of the show where I call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Always good. Always good. Always good. Always good. So, folks, we just had an amazing event in Washington, D.C. Videos are still going up. My talk will go up on Monday. We had 2 more talks from the event go up today. And we've only got 2 super chats that have come in. I am here to answer your questions for the next couple hours. It's not going to take me 2 hours to answer these 2 questions. They're good questions, but they're not 2-hour questions. So please send more questions. Now is the time to send a super chat question to get me to talk about. I do have plenty of energy. I am going to get more water, and I will be able to answer your questions. But please send questions. We have a tradition on here that we play music. We play music. So I think there was a song I wanted to play on this stream a few times ago, and I couldn't get it to work. And tonight, I think I can get it to work. And that's like a communist song that I like kind of ironically. There's this composer from Canada called Cornelius Cardew. Cornelius Cardew. And he wrote songs, he was an experimental composer in Britain, and he wrote songs that were very, 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 very communist, to say the least. And they're kind of hilarious because he shoves a lot of communist vocabulary into the lyrics. He was an experimental composer in Britain, and then he had this great conversion revelation, and he became a hardcore Marxist-Leninist communist. So he wrote some songs. I'm going to put on his song, but please join the Center for Political Innovation, and we are having a workshop coming up February 22nd that will be taking place in Minneapolis. It's going to be great. I just booked my flight today. It's going to be awesome, so I hope you can join us at the workshop. But the first song I'm going to put on, I am going to put on the song Workers of Ontario. So while that song is on, please send more questions. Get me talking. Oh, Gabby in Chicago, good to have you with us. Please send super chats or Rumble rants. Get me talking for the second half of the show. So yeah, we're going to put on the song I tried to play a few streams back, but couldn't get it to work. We're going to put on the song The Workers of Ontario. And then after that, if we got some more super chats, I'll be ready to speak. If not, I will put on another song. So this is the first song we're putting on. This is Cornelius Cardew's classic, The Workers of Ontario. I imagine in some future communist society, this will be on the Sesame Street. I imagine a Muppet with like a construction worker helmet singing this song. And this is also in honor of Donald Trump's call to annex Canada and make it part of the United States. So here we go. The Workers of Ontario.
We are the workers of Ontario. United States. We work for the rich of Canada. We work under the yoke of wage slavery, hauling the riches out of the earth, manufacturing commodities for the rich to sell. We are the workers of Ontario, a mighty section of the Canadian working class. We are the workers of Ontario, the workers of Ontario. We hail from the north and from the south. In the north we mine the ore, in the south we manufacture. We are a part of the Canadian proletariat. We are workers of Ontario, long oppressed by the graft and corruption, brought into the organized working class by the blacklegs, the sellouts, the traitors, the labor aristocracy, those who swear by the name of capital. Big bosses of the auto workers, stealing of the union. Every one of them wants our blood to be sucked. We are the workers of Ontario, the workers of Ontario. We hail from the north and from the south. In the north we mine the ore, in the south we manufacture. We are a part of the Canadian proletariat. In the 40s we fought against exploitation, and in the 50s we never stopped. Many were the struggles which the rich cannot forget, yet still they say we're for the capitalist system. Yet our ideology is Marxist Leninism. We are workers and like workers everywhere. Our aspiration is for socialism, ushered in by violent revolution. We are the workers of Ontario, the workers of Ontario. We hail from the north and from the south. In the north we mine the ore, in the south we manufacture. We are a part of the Canadian proletariat.
And actually, some of the themes I was talking about, that song is called The Workers of Ontario by Cornelius Cardew. Some of the stuff I was talking about in there about, the split in socialism, that line about, we are workers of Ontario, long oppressed by the graft and corruption, brought into the organized working class by the blacklegs, the sellout, the traders, the labor aristocracy, those who swear by the name of capital. Big bosses of the auto workers, steel, and other unions. Every one of them wants our blood to be sucked. That part is about fake socialists. It's about the split in socialism. That's the whole thing about, imperialism and all of that, about social democracy and sellout labor leaders. Oh, you like it? Well, there you go. And thank you. We got 3 super chats. So we're still waiting for more questions to come in. It's, I still got a couple more hours in me. But we did have a great event in Washington, D.C. So I thought I would show one of the speeches. This is Jamarl Thomas, who has a great YouTube channel. I go on his YouTube channel a lot. He has a morning YouTube show that he does every morning. And he came and he spoke at our event on Inauguration Day in Washington, D.C. So I'm going to show Jamarl Thomas's speech. So keep the super chats rolling in. I really do want to answer your questions. We only have 3 so far. So super chats on YouTube, Rumble Rants on Rumble. I'm here to answer your questions. Keep sending them in. This is Jamarl Thomas's speech.
I wanted to introduce our next speaker, who is yet another great friend and yet another great radio broadcaster. He does morning radio broadcasts. I was on his radio program, and now he does YouTube streams online, and that's Jamarl Thomas. And Jamarl Thomas, you told me before you came here, this has been the first public speech you ever given.
Yeah.
I am really excited to see. It was the first time. You used to be amusing me on your radio show all the time on your morning broadcast, so I'm curious to see what you're like for an audience. But I'm sure it's going to be great, and you talk about really, really important issues every morning at your show. And you have very, very high-level guests, really high-level international experts on your program. So it's really an honor to have you here, Jamarl. Thanks for coming on in and being here to give a presentation. So welcome.
Thanks, Jim.
Much appreciated. Absolutely. Yeah, no pressure. I'm glad to be here. And I appreciate Caleb for giving me an introduction to here. Yeah, first time. I've done radio for so many years, so for that matter, just my own channel, but I've never had the opportunity to speak. So no, this is awesome. John Wayne. I'll go with John Wayne. I'll start with that. John Wayne, when John F. Kennedy got elected, made the saying of, I didn't vote for him, he's my president, I hope he does well. And I felt that way when Trump got elected, that he's not my president, I didn't choose him, I didn't vote for him, but all things being equal, I want him to do well. There are things that Donald Trump was articulating that I backed and that I wanted him to back and put more emphasis on. And one of those things is the issue of war. I think it was Garland. Garland is the one who turned me on to that saying. He's like, I will go to war with arm in arm, with any man, providing that man is doing good. And yes, it's not the exact same quote, but I'll go with it nonetheless. Because I think it's true. There's something to be said about somebody doing something good, doing something right. And Donald Trump, one of the things that he did right was, I'm going to end wars, not start them. Applause, right? Like, I don't. If it's burglaries, you're going to do that and you're going to stand by that, then you have my support on that particular issue. It's not over, like, across the board, right? Yes, Donald Trump's going to do some horrible things in that office. I accept that. I understand that's going to be baked into it. By the same token, we have hundreds of thousands of people who are losing their lives in a modern war that never needed to take place, that is completely catastrophic. And when you ask the question of what was it for, I don't have an answer for that. And I will wager they don't have an answer for it either, at least not in real terms. It's like you get a value set in the country to which you operate, and you apply that value set to the rest of the world. And one of those main values is war is not necessarily a good thing. It should be something that we rebel against, that we don't necessarily want, but that is not the orthodoxy. You have a clown car, a sociopath, one after another, Bat Miller, Patel, Anthony Blinken, even the administration itself, in regards to the way that they organize their mindset and the way that they frame the rest of the world. And yet, Trump comes out, I'm going to end wars, not start them. And I remember even when he won, he said, I am going to make my mission to do what I say I'm going to do, especially on this issue of war and on this issue of peace. And so on that, the very specifics of it, he gets my applause for being willing to do so and to buck the orthodoxy in doing so. I'm glad you have this picture here. One of the things during Donald Trump's first administration was this willingness to go and talk to Kim Jong-un. I don't have this belief that Donald Trump is a dove. I do have this belief that he has a willingness and maybe even a want to make deals on these various issues in a way that the other party just doesn't. It's not on their radar. It's not in their mindset. Yeah. They have this mindset of endless war. And if you remember when J.D. Vance was on the debate stage and they were going after J.D. Vance for Trump doing this, basically attacking the guy for going to make peace. And one of the things that I realized was that it's a possibility. Like, it's proof of concept. The idea that you could go, shake the man's hand, look the man in the eye, and say, I get that we have common interests. I get the bad things that you're going to have, that you care about, that you need. And I'm going to acknowledge those things and work with you on those things. And what did the Democratic Party say? Oh my God, he's stopping the dictators. Or what did the media say? How dare Donald Trump go and talk to Kim Jong-un? He's going to give credibility and legitimacy to Kim Jong-un. It's like, he stopped firing missiles into the Sea of Japan. It's a proof of concept. It shows that you can make peace with these groups. And yet the Orthodox is saying, that's horrible, that's a bad idea, we don't necessarily like you doing that. I think they're out of their minds. I think it's a straight sociopath in regards to what they're willing to accept. You get the Ukraine war, and Trump says, I'm going to end that war should have never taken place. And what do the Democrats say? You're just going to let the dictators win. And so, from their point of view, you need to go out and throw your kids into the war. Meaning you need your 18-year-olds to go out and fight in losing, completely lost battle. Because that is the position that the orthodoxy takes on the issue. Trump said this is appalling. I can't believe we're doing this. NATO expansion was always a red line. And I say to myself, oh my God, that's the first time I ever heard somebody articulate something that's just flat fact true in our current political system, in our current political space. It's astonishing that it took Trump to say it. And, you know, even the Gaza thing, when the Muslims went to Trump, and Trump said, I'm going to end this war. And Harris turned around and said, well, I am not going to make any adjustments or changes to what Joe Biden was doing on this front. And so it's like, wait a minute, what do you mean you're not going to make changes? You guys are backing your genocide. And even to the point of saying, you know, that dangerous baby had to be killed because, you know, it was a dangerous baby by that valiant soldier that did so. Over and over again, you would get one sociopath, one lunatic after the next, effectively saying, Israel has the right to defend itself, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of what takes place. When you're pointing out, yeah, but you're killing tens of thousands of kids. Israel has the right to defend itself. Trump goes to the Muslim communities in their war. Now, I got to be honest, I didn't believe him on it. Under normal circumstances, he's been so obsequious to Israel. And yet, I was playing this clip for Garland where Donald Trump made this kind of honest assessment saying Netanyahu doesn't want to end the war. Basically, Netanyahu doesn't believe in peace. He doesn't necessarily want to deal. Whereas the Palestinians did. He said it blew his mind. And so it's like, okay, is that rattling around in his brain regardless of the position that he comes out with and enunciates? He, very straight before he even got into office, creates a ceasefire. A position that the Democratic Party had, the Democratic Party would never do. The idea if you're paying 70, 80% for the bombs, bullets, intelligence, the missile systems, you have special forces in, you give them political cover to, and yet you turn around and tell American public, we have no power over Israel. It's an independent nation, it can do whatever it wants. And yet, our press agencies was effectively running diplomatic and political cover for that government as it killed tens of thousands of babies, women, children, etc. We were culpable for what they were doing. And yet, Trump, the guy who was supposed to be completely in the back pocket of Netanyahu, says, I'm going to end the war. And before he even gets into office, sends this guy over there to say, I don't care what day it is. You're going to end this. And you're going to accept the deal that had been on the table for months that you didn't necessarily want and that you fundamentally rejected. That is a mind-blowing thing when you see that take place in regards to political space. And so, you know, with the North Korea thing, that's going to be something else that I'm hoping that Donald Trump gets involved in and gets more willing to kind of bring these forces together, at the very least, bring these things and these conflicts to a close. So, you know, this is not me rah-rahing Trump, and it's just a big Trump supporter. I'm not. Like I said, I didn't vote for him at all. And to be honest with you, after Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden, didn't necessarily want to accept the results, I thought he should have been impeached and convicted for that. Because from my point of view, it's outlandish that we give you that much power. And then, you know, there's a philosophical, ethical responsibility to use that power in ways that are not necessarily trying to stay in office beyond the term to which you lost. By the same token, the American public saw it that that was a better alternative than the people he was running against. And that guy is the guy that they put into office. So from my point of view, this is not necessarily a situation where I'm thinking everything Trump is going to do is going to be great. It's not that. It's more so that of all the political people, he has random moments where he says things that are true. Obama killed 500,000 people in Syria, Ahmed Rivas regime change war. I'm like, wow, I can't believe he said that. And it is true. Yeah. I mean, you go item by item by item on these things. And every random blue moon, Trump will say something that just so happens to be true. There are danger points. Iran, Venezuela, Mexico, agreed, 1,000%. At the same token, the orthodoxy also maybe not necessarily put these things that are crosshairs, but the reality of it is they seem to have this point of view that endless war is fun. And I think that is outlandish. Yeah. And so, I don't know, if I get moments, I have no expectations of Trump, but there are things that I want. And when I'm in there talking to Tucker Carlson, he said these wars haven't served us. We spent $10 trillion. We have nothing to show for it in the Middle East. I applaud that. I should applaud that. And I guess my major point is to close. If the guy is doing something good, support him for it. Give him, vocal accolades. That's why I love this. And that's one of the reasons why I braved the cold in order to get there, walk his own shit, and he's like, Davis, what But that's like I said, it's not about Ronnie Trump. It's about looking at items and issues that he may actually, let's say, this kind of Venn diagram in regards to that. I am sick of these wars. I don't think these wars do us any justice. And to have Trump say the same thing when he's talking about these wars haven't served us. We spent $10 trillion in the Middle East. What do we have to show for it? I'm going to end wars, not to start them. And I said to myself, good. If nothing else, do that. That will be good. I don't want 500,000 people getting killed in Ukraine and they're sending their kids. I don't want us sending all of this money to Israel and they were killing and slaughtering all of these people. I don't necessarily want this notion of using Taiwan as a battering ram against China, where Joe Biden said, yes, we would militarily defend Taiwan in a war that we would definitely lose, and ignoring the fact that the one China policy, by our own standing, that Taiwan is part of China. But again, we agitate against those things. I am sick of these wars. And I would argue that the American public is also sick of these wars. And if that is put on the table, in which it was, on the ballot, I think they would choose, let's stop these wars. Let's invest that money into us, into the American public itself. We can be a better nation. We can have a better world. And yeah, you can create win-win relationships, just like right here. A win-win relationship, a proof of concept that peace is possible if indeed you're willing to kind of acknowledge that other people have interests. And that our interests shouldn't necessarily supersede their interests in every situation because we're superior, we're just better, our morals are better, we're a democracy, and because we're a democracy, we, or whatever particular leads to get to set rules-based order, whatever the hell that means. No, you can acknowledge that other countries have interests that maybe against your own, that doesn't necessarily need or require a war to reconcile, or for that matter, doesn't require sanctions to reconcile. It's just being a person and being able to work, or let's say a country, and being able to work with other countries in a way of win-win relationships. I am a believer that those win-win relationships exist. And if Donald Trump, at the very least, to the degree to which he says he's going to do that, he should be supported for it. If he goes off the rails, hit him. Zero issue with it. But if he's doing something well, don't get into this ideological derangement syndrome where everything must be this reflexiveness against Trump, regardless of what it is, even when it's right. No. If the guy's doing something right, acknowledge him. Tell him it's right. And maybe he'll do more of that right, considering he's getting acknowledgement for it. So, from my point of view, again, I know I have to say, not necessarily a fan of Trump, but I am a fan of this willingness to engage and this willingness to buck the orthodoxy on the issue of war and peace and being able to reach out to the various countries, whether it's Russia, whether it's China, whether it's Korea, regardless of where these places are, to be willing to do so. And up to this point, it seems that he's shown a willingness. By the way, just to admit, they always say it took Nixon to go to China. And I'm hoping that this is true also for Iran. It takes Trump to go to Iran, or it would take Trump to make deals with Kim Jong-un, or it would take Trump to make deals with Putin in order to end the Ukraine war, however that war gets ended. I am deeply hoping that he was serious about this idea. I'm going to end wars, not start them. That is going to be my legacy. It's Donald Trump. I have no chains on me. This is my last term. I'm nearly hitting 80. So yeah, this is where I want to go. This is what I want to do. And if indeed he does that, support him for it. Thank you all.
Wow, well, the first speech you ever did, that was perfect.
Yeah. So that was Jamarl Thomas. Really great to have him there at the event. Great presentation that he gave. I see we've had a few more super chats that have come in. That is appreciated. I don't see any Rumble rants, but that's okay. We can do super chats. There's one more speech that we did post today, and that was from, Reverend Stevens, who helped us carry out the Peace Maga operation and get that Trump-Kim banner in the streets of Manhattan. And his speech I actually was really moved by, because he's definitely not a communist. I'll tell you that much. He is a pastor in a rather conservative Korean church, but he has been a great friend, and he's really a big supporter of peace with North Korea, peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And he gave a very heartfelt, meaningful talk about what his relationship with CPI has meant. And this speech, I really hope that you will watch this, because this is what coalition building it shows, right? If you want to get things done in the real world, you need to make friends. And often the best and most important friends you can make are in very, very unlikely places. There are loads of people who agree with me on the internet, but when it comes to getting stuff done in the real world, are not very helpful. But here's somebody who doesn't agree with me on a lot, but he's an open-minded person, a kind person, a person who really wants to do right in the world. And honestly, I have learned a huge amount from him. So I'm going to put Milhan's speech on. Any more super chats, please send them in. And hopefully enough super chats come in after this, we can just start answering people's questions. I'll put on Reverend Milhan Stevens, his presentation that he gave at our event in DC, our Inauguration Day event. Here's him.
This is a person I really look up to and admire. Someone who has taught me a huge amount. Just a really noble person with so much to show me and so much to share with me. And I'm deeply honored to know Reverend Milhan Stevens. His church was actually having a big event in Las Vegas. So he flew from Las Vegas directly to DC so he could come here to speak. His church was heavily involved in making what you see here happen. His church was very key in making sure that Donald Trump was able to visit. And they have been advocates of the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula for quite some time. And I don't want to steal any thunder from Reverend Milhan. I know he's
as much as you want.
He's got a lot to say, but I guess I'll just say the founder of his church was someone who was arrested and imprisoned in North Korea. And then after the fall of the Soviet Union, went and met with Kim Il-sung, the founder of North Korea, and forgave him for the persecution that he endured, and talked about how the two countries could work together, and then began to do quite a bit of business in North Korea, and became a heavy investor in North Korea, which is something that the American government is certainly not thrilled about, and something that the South Korean government has also not been thrilled about in the past. But despite all the persecution that they have faced, they have continued to advocate peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. And I must say that, a lot of what we did in New York City with this banner would not have happened without Manhattan Family Church. It was their assistance and their support that got this banner on the streets of New York City, got out in front of Madison Square Garden when Trump had his great rally. So I'm really honored to know Reverend Milhan Stevens. I'm really looking forward to hearing what he has to say. So come on up, Reverend, and thank you for coming all the way from Massachusetts.
Caleb, what an amazing platform. Yes, and not just the height of this thing, but really the honor is mine. I think you've done all the work, honestly, and I think what was said before about you is I totally echo. You've been able to parse through all the madness of the world, find the truth, and give it to us hours and hours every day. So, of course, you could please give him a big hand. He's right where are you guys? I will tell you how we first met. It was unforgettable. He came into our church and he had his Bible, I think it was King James Version. And he's like going through every verse that I was putting up on the screen. And my assistant pastor was very suspicious of him. He thought he was some kind of persecutor. Because he would get that. As you mentioned, he was in prison in the U.S. too. He was put in Danbury prison on false charges, and so we're used to being persecuted. So here we go. And so we were praising extra loud that day, chasing Satan out. After they're like, and I meet Caleb, and he's talking really fast. And we've had con people come through. We're in Manhattan, right? So you get all kinds of people in the church. He's talking really fast. He's like, oh, he's a journalist. Okay, and I even told you this, like, dude, you gotta slow down because you sound like a con man right now. And
And so, but that's how it started. And when I guess what really started was the fact that we had a common enemy. And I never thought I'd make a friend because of a common enemy. Because I'm always about loving your enemy and marrying your enemy. Everyone's really big about marrying your enemy. But to have a common enemy actually brought us together in the beginning. And I won't mention names or anything. I'm not good with names anyway. I just offer it over to God, and I'm glad in this opportunity to meet. But Caleb and CPI is the voice, the truth, and another word for peace and truth. It's so refreshing because if I watch Fox or CNN, it's for entertainment. For Caleb, it's like 20% entertainment and 80% truth. And I think this is our country has to grow up and listen to the truth and not just be, like you said, fallen personalities and things like this. And Caleb taught me so much about communism, socialism. Because if you know about our church, the Unification Church, we're a very big anti-communist, movement that we violently, we're having fist fights in the streets. That wasn't my generation. But Caleb really helped me understand there's really a big other side of this story. And everything, in fact, every conversation we've had was completely new for each of us. Everything Caleb said was completely new. And anything I said was completely old. Well, you've already read the books, but anyway, English new. Okay. I had something I wanted to say. Oh, how was the Trump, the inauguration? How do you feel?
I feel great.
What are some words? Great stuff. Positive. Positive.
Stoked.
Stoked. Oh, energizing. Hopeful.
Nervous. A little nervous.
That's true. I like that.
Yeah, in Mexico because I have family members who are Mexican.
It's true.
I think it was like cautious excitement. I like that sometimes. Yeah, it's out there. But no, yeah, that's a good one. That's how I feel too. And but I have noticed since we put those banners up in New York, maybe it's just me, but I've been hearing peace get to the top of the agenda. Before it was all kinds of whatever, drama was going on, but now they're proud to say this is a peace presidency. And even Trump said it today, because, he read his statement, but sometimes he would add something afterwards, right? And when he said he wanted to be the president of peace and unity, I think that was real. I think he really wanted to make sure we understood that. And I do believe, as Caleb has once said, or maybe many times before, that we can't change the world, but we can move it in the right direction, just nudge it over. And I think you did. Let's give ourselves a hand. CPI. Yep. Dare to struggle. Dare to win. Dare to struggle. Dare to win. Only peace can make America great again.
That's right.
Only peace can make America great again. If you don't it's one of the things to say, you just say that, right? I think that's it. Yep. Good rule of thumb. I also want to thank all the people who went out this morning. You can, I don't know if you want to stand or Caleb, you'll acknowledge them later. But
everyone went out.
I got to see you go out and come back. And Brian was so cold. The house could have been turned on twice the heat to get back to normal. The bed is probably this was not enough to warm back up. Jesus, Jesus loves him. By the way, do you feel God is with us?
Yeah.
Which God?
The one inside your heart. Oh gosh, there is anyway. Yeah, I believe that, and with whatever discernment that God has given me, I really believe God is with this not so small movement. That's all God needs. That's all God ever needed to me for a change. So why am I here? Besides Cale's invitation, is I love my family, I love my children, my wife, my community, And I want to make it as impossible as possible for us to have a world filled with war, with woke nonsense. I almost cried listening to Trump say, "There's two genders." Sorry, I forget everything if I'm a pastor, right? So I'm allowed to say this. There's two genders. And when I heard that, I could and I can't tell you how, I have to talk to the principal of the school to just I need to understand something. Like, they couldn't indoctrinate my kids or not, because I can teach my kids the basics of reading, writing, if I have to. But I love this country. I grew up in the public schools, and I want to be able to send my kids to public school and have that experience, and just needs to just focus on what they actually need educated on. So I'm really excited. And this is the movement of action. That's no question. And as being a, I can say Mooney, but you guys can't say Mooney. Yeah, but as a Mooney, we've been persecuted a lot. And so I identify with Caleb. We're not afraid to speak the truth. I mean, I won't get into it too much, but we said some very unpopular things. And on top of our persecution, Caleb's not afraid of that. And that's why we trust. And thank God for the president who was persecuted and was killed. His honorary president. And like Brian's saying, right? This was like this is the people's FU to, whoever thinks they run the show. So I'm excited that the families are put in the center again. Families are put in the center again. The people who make this country great. All right, I'm going to preach a little bit here. I want to talk about 3 things that I want to leave you with. If I can leave you with anything, that's peace, unification, and innovation. I love this word, Caleb. I'm going to use it more. Okay, if you watch my sermons online, you'll hear me talk about innovation more. Okay, I promise. Peace. We kind of take this for granted. It's a word we think we all can define. As it turns out, everyone's peace is a little bit different. And sometimes those little differences create wars, ideologies. And so I think it's very important for us to be clear with myself, what is peace? And so I hope you could take a moment to really reflect on that and share it with other people. Because your position on peace is different, but it needs to be said. And then what we have to do is put it all on the table, see what we had in common, and make sure our elected leaders focus on those things. But if we don't speak up, then they won't know. So it's really important. That's peace. Now, there's no peace without unification, unity. That Venn diagram that a certain VP loves so much. We have to make those. That's where we have in common. And that's very important because we can, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, we can either live together as friends or die as enemies. I forget. You know what I'm talking about. Okay, yeah. Forget it, Dr. King, whatever they were. But we have to come together somehow. It's a must. And then I'd say there's no unification without innovation. It takes an incredible amount of creative energy to bring people together.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
It's hilarious. People whose purpose is to divide, so lazy. There's really no creativity involved in that. I'm starting to say that my 2-year-old can do that. For making chaos, but I just got a report from home saying that she put paint on the bedroom door. It doesn't take any creativity it takes your whole heart and soul and mind and intellect and willpower to bring people together. And I'm telling you, only the truth will bring people together, right? So no matter how smart we are and kind of try to work up corners and things, only the truth will bring us together. And again, CPI is is 10 years ahead. Is 10 years ahead. I know that because you're also, we have a similar agenda, so there must be. You must be definitely true about it. And so, innovation. I want to talk about 1 Corinthians 3:9. For we are co-creators in God's service. You are God's field, God's building. So it's really an honor and a divine role to be human, to innovate. It's our responsibility. It's not a nice thing, but it's our responsibility. And if we don't innovate, chaos, wars are just wrong. Because I'll tell you what, the biggest killer is boredom. Yeah, you have these bureaucrats or whoever, any of us, you and me. Boredom, that's what it's just they start getting weird ideas. Coming up with problems that that aren't helpful at all. I preach this often saying, I think that our goal is to create the right problems or to find the right problems. Not create ones that really are not going to help families. And then John 14:12, very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these, because I'm going to the Father. So, we've had some confirmations even in the last 24 hours that God is here. Even on my lift over to the Airbnb where we're at, this lady, God bless her, she's like, can I take a call, a conference call? And I said, sure. And there was a prayer call. And on that call, there were 9,000 people praying at the same time for our country. And I'm sure for the protection of this event today. Even this event today. I believe. I felt that. And I was telling her what I'm about to do. And she felt inspired. And we thought, this is all, we're not alone, is what I'm trying to say. We're not alone. It may seem like that, but I'm telling you, there are a lot of people who are quiet, who are just once they see Caleb's face and they start hearing some things, then maybe they'll feel okay, actually, the truth is going to come. And we could finally have world peace. Finally, I want to say, I believed and prayed for world peace my entire life, but it wasn't until I met GPI that I know world peace is possible. I can see world peace in all of our time, in my lifetime, and especially my children's lifetime. So thank you again, Caleb. Thank you, CPI, and thank you all for being here. God bless you.
Yeah. No, one of the best moments from the day when we were out was when a row of South Korean folks, one by one, were getting their picture taken with the banner of Kim Jong-un shaking hands with Trump. That was just an utterly amazing moment. I can show that little clip from the video. I'm not going to show the whole outreach video, but this particular clip, it was like, wow. Absolutely wow.
Countries in Europe continuing to fund their militaries so that they can have free healthcare and our citizens can go and die on the steps of a hospital. It's completely unfair and stupid.
Donald Trump, he can't be president again because there's only 2 terms allowed in the Constitution. However, he wants to be remembered as a great leader. That's what Donald Trump wants to be remembered as. So to be a great leader, he needs to stand up to Wall Street. He needs to stand up to the war makers. He needs to fight for working families here in America.
What would you say to the people who call Trump a fascist, say that we're in danger of losing our democracy?
I think they just don't have any historical perspective to know what they're saying. I mean, that's just factually untrue.
Do you think Donald Trump can bring peace to Korea? Can he bring peace to Korea? Do you support the banner? You like it?
Hope that President Trump can contribute to denuclearize North Korea and talk to Kim Jong-un and have some the conversation and then bring the peace on the Korean Peninsula.
Yeah, you're happy to see this?
Yeah.
masses of the people in their millions are the makers of history, not the elites on Wall Street, not the Bidens of the world, the neocons who want to keep you poor so that they can stay rich. Only peace will make America great again.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great day. That was absolutely a great day, and we had a great event. My presentation will be up on Monday. Tomorrow on this YouTube channel, Don DeBar, the great radio journalist, anti-imperialist, his speech will go up tomorrow. Dr. Wilmer Leon, a great radio host and political scientist, his speech will go up tomorrow. So yeah, now I am still, we got 5 super chats that have come in, and I do want to answer people's questions. So I will give you all, and we've got a Rumble rant, has come in from Gavin. So we have a Rumble rant. So I will give you all one last chance, to send in super chats. I mean, obviously if you're doing them as I'm answering the other ones, that works, but I'm going to do one more thing, and then I'll start answering super chats. Yeah. I guess I will quickly recite a poem that I've recited on here many times. Then I'll put some music on, and then we'll start answering questions. Right? We got 5 super chats, 1 Rumble rant. Send any more super chats you got. I'm here to answer your questions. We're talking anti-imperialism. We're talking the struggle for peace. This is a poem that has meant a lot to me over the years. I believe it is Masonic in origin. It was first recited to me by an older communist. But anyway, it goes like this. On a busy street in a busy town, I saw them tearing a building down. With a ho-heave-ho and a lusty yell, the men swung a beam and a side wall fell. So I said to the foreman, are these men skilled? Like those you would hire if you wanted to build? And the foreman just smiled and said, no, indeed. Unskilled labor is all that I need, for I can easily wreck in a week or two that which took builders years to do. So I thought to myself as I walked away, which of these roles have I tried to play? Am I a builder who builds with care, measuring life with a compass and square? Am I living my life by a well-made plan and striving to do the best that I can? Or am I the type who scours the town, content with the labor of tearing things down? I really appreciate that poem because it's very easy to wreck. It's very easy to call out and condemn somebody. It's very easy to fight with somebody. It's very easy to create drama. But pulling people together to build and construct and advance an agenda to make the world a better place is difficult. And I try to keep that in mind. I want to be a builder. I don't want to be a wrecker. So I'm going to put on music. I'm going to put on some music. And then I'm going to start answering people's questions. So we got 5 super chats, 1 Rumble rant. That I've thought about that, about Radio Free Europe. I'll just respond to this before I put the music on. I don't know quite what was going on there. I'll tell you, Washington Post took our picture and even got the names of Noah and Connor who were holding the banner. And so far, they have not run the picture. A number of different news agencies filmed us, and we're still trying to find anybody else who filmed that banner. But the fact that Radio Free Europe ran the image of that, we think that that was some kind of signal. I think that that was, the deep state saying to Trump, we're willing to negotiate. Because, I am like Invisible Man in mainstream media. The New York Times once referred to me as a man claiming to be from RT. I couldn't believe it. Maggie Haberman took my ID. She took my name, but I guess she just didn't want to give me the boost of having my name in the New York Times. So they quoted me as a man claiming to be from RT. I mean, they've gone out of their way to not give us attention, right? They make sure we don't go viral to make, I had a Wikipedia page. They took it down, even though, I've been in all kinds of news articles, and it's weird, right? And they will do everything they can to not mention CPI. But in this instance, we had a U.S. government propaganda network, part of Voice of America, Radio Free Asia, film us. I think that was a message. I think that was the deep state signaling that they want to negotiate on the Korean Peninsula. Because you'll notice that clip, they didn't show very much. There was, all kinds of people outside the Trump thing. There were religious groups handing out, Christian books. There were the God Hates Gay people, the Falun Gong people were out there, and they showed us. And I feel like that was the deep state signaling North Korea that they are willing to negotiate. Trump has apparently announced he's willing to negotiate, because that was very, very odd. And especially since a lot of news outlets took video of us but didn't do anything about it. Now, the Columbia School of Journalism quoted us, but they didn't say the name of our group. They just said that we had the banner. But then Radio Free Europe, which is U.S. government propaganda, they did, highlight us. So that was very odd. We'll see what happens. Look, it's always a struggle. We handed out thousands of copies of our pamphlet. We had a great event. More video of the event is coming out. Peter Coffin is making a documentary. So look, we are just doing the best we can, right? These are really toxic times, I must say. The cancel culture, the harassment, the woke leftism that has just destroyed. Leftism has turned into a completely toxic atmosphere. No anti-imperialism, just woke, LGBT, hate, call out. You're a fascist. No, you're a fascist. I mean, it's just gotten disgusting. People fighting with each other on the internet. We're saying get off the internet and build a movement. That's what we're saying. We're organizing. We're having workshops. We're out there engaging with people. We're unfurling huge banners about peace and negotiating and having peace with North Korea. We're putting on conferences about anti-imperialism. We printed 1,000 copies of this pamphlet. We printed not 1,000 copies. We printed 2,000 copies of this pamphlet. And we got almost all of them out, right? This pamphlet, A New Day for America. It's a pamphlet all about anti-imperialism that we printed, especially for the Trump inauguration, because we wanted to engage with Trump supporters about anti-imperialism, opposing globalism, imperialism. We are trying to build, and it's not easy. It's not rewarding, and it gets us lots of internet harassment. It also gets us U.S. government harassment. I've had encounters with the FBI, etc. And but I just keep going because this is where my heart is, and this is what I believe in. And to be true to myself, this is who I must be. And so I look for whoever I can organize with, whoever I can build a real anti-imperialist movement, whoever I can speak up in the name of working families with. I'm willing to do it, right? And that's what's really beautiful. And that if you can be genuine, you will attract genuine people. And so we just keep going. So it's pretty weird. Washington Post took our picture, took the names, and then didn't run the story. But Radio Free Europe showed the image of our organization. Very interesting, right? And it was neat that, back in October, at Madison Square Garden, we got highlighted by the New Yorker magazine. That was pretty neat. We're in a strange time, right? So we're just doing our best. We want to build peace. That's what we want. So, if you are able to join us, we're having a workshop coming up in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. It's going to be great. You can register to come to the workshop. And in a second, I'm going to start answering questions. But we've only got 5 super chats and we've only got 1 Rumble rant. So, you want to sign up for the workshop in Minneapolis? That would be great. I'll put it in the Rumble also. That would be great. Come and join us in Minneapolis. We don't get to that part of the country very much, but we're coming out there. We're making our rounds. We're trying to organize different people here in our country, get to every end of the country. I've never actually been to Minneapolis before, believe it or not. It's a city I have never been to, so it'll be my first time. I just booked my flight today. But anyhow, join us in Minneapolis. I'm going to put on 1 song, and then I'm just going to start answering questions. So please, if you would like your questions answered, send a super chat on YouTube or send a Rumble rant on Rumble. This is a song from the Los Angeles Family Church where I spoke about peaceful reunification of Korea. It's one of their hymns. It's called Pledge. And then after that, I'm going to start answering questions. All right. Okay. So now I'm going to start answering people's questions. If you got any more Rumble rants or super chats, throw it my way. I'm answering questions. First Rumble rant comes from Gavin. Gavin says, the ruling class is once again allowing the class struggle narrative because it's useful against Trump, peace, and growth. How can we show that peace matters more than Bernie's policies? Now, that's interesting. First of all, the first thing to throw out there, I don't think it's either or, right? I think Bernie-ish policies and peace walk hand in hand. But at the same time, the Democrats have done absolutely nothing for healthcare. Nothing. They have done absolutely nothing for student debt. I mean, they give lip service to those ideas. And the very same people that suddenly, now that Trump's in office, they're willing to talk about those things, are the very same people that called you a Nazi, called you a white supremacist, called you, I mean, look, let's be real. The Medicare for All marches, this was a big point in my book on Brian Thompson. The Medicare for All marches were Nazi baited. It was class reductionism and all of that. And they're just getting desperate. That's all this shows. They have done nothing for those issues. At the same time, I think we can point out the countries that are attacked are countries that have economic systems where the state controls the means of production and plans out the economy to ensure that there's economic growth. The Democrats, at this point, they have lost so badly. And the woke stuff doesn't work. People don't want to go out and fight against white privilege. People don't want to go out and fight against, two genders existing. People want to go out and fight for healthcare. So the Democrats are so desperate, they're willing to fall back on that rhetoric because they don't have to deliver on it. I don't think the Democrats are at all sincere. And the way they treated Bernie Sanders the first time and the second time, and the way they responded to it, the way they treated the Medicare for All marches, the way Biden ruled for 4 years after he stole the election in 2020, they're not going to do anything about those issues. So I think this is just an attempt by the Democrats, the Democratic commentators, not even Democrat politicians, but Democrat commentators, to get people to still listen to them. People want to hear the Bernie-ish stuff. And so to keep people listening to them, people are so burned out on wokeism that to keep people listening to them, they have to start talking DSA-ish economic populism again. But I don't think it's an either or, and I don't think the Democrats are at all sincere about it. So I don't think that's at all a concern. I will say though, and let me repeat this. We have never in CPI said that the correct answer is to get on the opposite side of the culture war, right? The whole point of CPI, there are people in CPI who are for gay marriage. There are people in CPI who are against gay marriage. There are people in CPI who are for abortion. There are people in CPI who are against abortion. We don't want to take sides in the culture war. And that's why we were attacked by the woke left. Oh my God, you're erasing LGBT and it was just an unforgivable crime that we, didn't make gay or abortion the dividing line. Well, and then another current emerged, people that were watching us, and they emerged and they just did the opposite of what the woke people did. And they decided that they were going to talk about nothing but how much they hate gay people and how much they don't believe in abortion. And they just became the mirror opposite of the woke left. And they attacked us also. And they attack us in roughly the same childish, internet-based, stupid way, right? And we're not them. They're not us. And we're not the woke left. We're not going around with rainbow flags. We're not making LGBT and all of that the issue. And on top of that, we're not making anti-LGBT and anti-abortion the issue. We're here to talk about justice for working families and opposing the danger of a new world war and the emerging low-wage police state. We need a government of action to fight for working families. And that's what we're about. And that is against the interests of imperialism, building up the economic development of America and opposing the global monopolistic system of imperialism. That's what we're about. And the woke left is not for that. They're for, dividing the United States and, and atomizing people and breaking down any sense of collective identity. And the mainstream of the right isn't for that either. Therefore, they want to hate Muslims. They want to, impose radical free market, austerity policies. They're not for that either. What we're for, which is economic justice for working families and opposing the global system of, globalism, imperialism, monopolistic capitalism, the low wage police. I mean, what we're for is the antithesis of imperialism. Okay. So I don't think the Democrats are sincere, and they're suddenly, 8 years after they stole the election from Bernie Sanders, they've suddenly, they just, it's finally okay to talk about economic justice. Forget it. Nope. Not buying it. Yeah, so I'm not worried about this, Gavin. I know that the young turds are talking a certain way. I know that BreadTube is dead. BreadTube is not coming back. BreadTube is dead in the water. We had something to do with destroying BreadTube. I will say, somebody mentioned the name Steve Hassan in the chat. Steve Hassan, right? I got a tip that Steve Hassan, the deep state connected, deprogrammer, was part of the was part of BreadTube, that he was directing BreadTube, advising them, etc. So I wrote a book called BreadTube Serves Imperialism. And you better believe I said that it looks to me like some sections of the intelligence agency are promoting BreadTube. And people, they made fun of it. They made streams that were like hours long. Oh, that's the stupidest thing. He thinks we're all CIA. And then what happened? Well, Gray Zone came out with a smoking gun. And they said, here we go. It looks like we've got receipts. British intelligence is funding Philosophy Tube Abigail Thorne. Oh, and then what happened? And then Caleb Kane, who is this doofus who is part of the BreadTube universe, former alt-right, but now, he became a BreadTube woke leftist. And he said, Caleb's got it all wrong. It's not just Steve Hassan who tells us what to do. No, there's this whole section of the FBI called Combating Extremism. That's who tells us what to do. Duh. And he basically admits there's a whole section of the FBI that's working with BreadTube about combating extremism. And it's like he just admits this in his interview. And it's just like, so it's not just Steve Hassan, it's the FBI. And he admits that they're working with the FBI, and he's like laughing at me. Caleb thought we only worked with Steve Hassan. It's actually the combating extremism wing of the FBI. And then, icing on the cake, Hillary Rodham Clinton, the Secretary of State who killed Gaddafi, right? The woman who started the civil war in Syria. Hillary Rodham Clinton does a video with ContraPoints, does a whole big episode about how amazing ContraPoints is, Hillary and Chelsea Clinton. At that point, it's blatantly obvious. BreadTube is an intelligence operation. I was right. Where are the apologies? Where is all the people, oh, you're retarded, oh, you think they were, is there any apology? No, I was 100% right. And there's so many examples of this. If every time I was right, I made $1 million, I would be one of the richest people in the world. But that's not how it works, because I'm right by exposing the evil things that the richest people in the world are doing. That's what this all kind of gets down to. So, it is what it is, but you just got to keep going. That Steve Hassan is a very evil man. Okay. He is very, very evil. He admits he was involved in forcibly kidnapping people, holding them against their will and trying to change their religious beliefs. Now, no matter what you think about any of the religious groups he didn't get along with, if you think that's okay, that, you can take a legal adult and hold them against their will and browbeat them until they change their religion. If you think that's okay, something's wrong with you. He admits that his mentor was Robert J. Lifton, the top CIA, Pentagon psychiatrist, the guy who wrote all their books about brainwashing and MK Ultra and mind control. And, Steve Hassan, you look at his whole history. He was involved with the Carter administration and their Koreagate operations. And Steve Hassan is, but anyway, the point is that BreadTube is over. BreadTube is over. They're not coming back. I don't think this is serious. I don't think the Democrats are really going to push Bernie policies, Gavin. because they would have to actually do them. And that would require them to like actually stand up and like have some spine and courage. No, they're never going to do that. The Democrats, the only thing the Democrats have learned is that, you know, the shrill social media culture, that's the way that they can be strong, right? Demand the shrill, woke, cancel culture atmosphere. And Americans are just burned out on that. People are tired of this. People are looking for something sincere. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for people who mean what they say and say what they mean. And that's us, right? And there's just so many frauds out there. And that was BreadTube's whole thing. Like, if you actually believe in anything, you're a big doofus. Oh, he actually believes in something. That's stupid. He should just smoke weed and play video games like me. Don't be a nerd and actually care about anything. Well, people are a little bit burned out on all of this. People are burned out on, you know, the reaction videos, YouTube. The algorithms have very dramatically changed. All these big YouTube channels, ContraPoints, what has she done lately? That's exactly. I mean, she's not doing any. They're all done, right? The terrain is dramatically changing, and slow and steady wins the race. Look, there's all kinds of internet drama happening in circles and we have nothing to do with it. Nothing, right? We have absolutely nothing to do with it. We're focused on building an in real life organization. And I'm looking at some of the toxicity that's coming out. I don't even know what to believe, and I don't care. And it makes me want to barf. And what saddens me is that I know that I shouldn't take a stand on any of this drama because they desperately want to. They're desperately trying to rope me into that drama. And I'm not interested, right? They've made fake memes about CPI saying that we regulate people's lives. We tell people in CPI they're not allowed to smoke or drink or have sex. We don't say that. We don't regulate people's personal lives at all. Other than we don't have drugs and alcohol at our events, which is responsible. You shouldn't have drugs and alcohol at events. Other than that, we don't regulate our members' personal lives. There's plenty of members of CPI who smoke cigarettes, plenty of members of CPI who, you know, live their own lives. It's not our business. We don't regulate people's personal lives. Someone actually made a fake meme that they circulated just because they wanted to rope us into some internet drama. Well, we're not interested. And there's people fighting with each other. We have nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. And we look at it and it all just makes me want to vomit. It all just makes me want to vomit. We were at the inauguration in the freezing cold with our beautiful banner that said only peace can make America great again. We handed out well over 1,000 copies of this pamphlet and talked to people, Trump supporters and others, about globalism, imperialism. And we've got a job to do. And we're doing that job. And we're sincere and we mean what we say. We're not playing an algorithmic game. We're not trying to be cool on the internet. We actually believe in what we're doing. We're trying to stop World War III. We're trying to build a movement. And so take it or leave it, right? That's who we are. And I think that our moment to shine is coming. The fact that the Trump administration has taken so many moves that are exactly what we've called for, freezing the aid to Ukraine, ceasefire in Gaza, like the American people are where we're at. They are where we're at. And they're not with the Trump administration's policies of austerity economics. They voted for Trump because they want growth. And at the end of the day, the only way you can get economic growth is you need a government to break the power of the big monopolies. That's what you need. And the people voting for Trump because they want economic growth, they're not going to get it from austerity. They're going to get it from a government of action that fights for working families. Good question, Gavin. And thank you. I hope I answered your question. I hope I answered it. Okay. Australia is completely dominated by Anglo-American finance. All government policies and programs ensure we're subordinated to imperialism, globalism. Yeah. Australia is part of the British Commonwealth. And I just want to say this. The Greenland thing and the Canada thing. Look, if Donald Trump actually rolls troops into Canada or rolls troops into Greenland, I'm against it. But I really don't think it's a big deal. I'm around for quite some time. Please send super chats, right? I got another hour in me at least. So, if Donald Trump actually rolls troops into Canada or Greenland or Panama for that matter, I'm opposed. But I really don't think, the Panama thing is a little bit more concerning, but the Greenland and Canada thing is not concerning at all. It's good that Trump fight with Canada because they're part of the British Commonwealth. They're an imperialist country. They're part of the imperialist world order. It's so much better that Trump fight with them than with China or Russia or Venezuela or Iran. And the same with Greenland, right? That's what, Denmark, Norway. It's better Donald Trump fight with another imperialist country than with China or Russia. Gulf of America, whatever. It's dumb. I don't care what you call it, right? America's still getting all the oil. The American oil companies are still getting all the oil from down there, right? I'm not worried about this. And they want us talking about it. That's why they put this out, right? They want Americans to think that imperialism is Donald Trump. No, imperialism is the system that opposes Donald Trump because he wants peace with Russia, right? This headline, this tells you they're trying to say, oh, Donald Trump is imperialism. Imperialism is when one country attacks another country. Wrong. Imperialism is a global economic system. Globalism, imperialism. It's a system that is destroying the world, and we need to break out of that system. And that's what my whole 2-hour opening rant was about. And yeah, so just the Greenland stuff, like, it's not worth talking about. It's a huge distraction. We need to focus peace with Russia. Trump wants to bring back the Iran deal. Did you see that? He's appointed somebody to negotiate an Iran nuclear deal. This is amazing, right? And so yeah, that's where I'm at. And you said it, David. I mean, Australia is part of Anglo-American finance. There you go. All right. Sorry if you've addressed this. How can minorities contextualize Trump revoking the Equal Opportunity Act? As a minority, it feels scary. Well, first of all, I think there's a court question there, right? I don't think you can evoke there's a lot of things that Trump did in his executive orders that aren't going to stand up in court. Getting rid of birthright citizenship, for example. That's in the Constitution. It's just not going to work, right? I mean, I'm sorry, the courts immediately struck that down. No, it's in the Constitution that if you're born here, you're a natural born citizen. If you were born here after the American Revolution, or you were living here at the time of the American Revolution, you're a citizen. You can't change that. And the same with affirmative action. There's affirmative action policies, and you can't revoke government policy like that with an executive order. And that, I mean, he did a lot of things that were pandering to conservatives that, yeah, his conservative base wants to hear. Elon Musk wants to hear. Vivek Ramaswamy wants to hear. Most Republicans want to hear. But I don't think you're going to stand up. And that's all I can say about that, right? I mean, you do remember, and it sounds like I'm defending Trump here, and I don't want to be defending Trump. I'm not interested in defending Trump the man. I am interested in opposing imperialism. All right? I'm interested in not having World War III. I'm interested in not having economic degrowth. I'm interested in not having the FBI drag people like the People's Democratic Uhuru movement to jail. So if you want me to say that what Donald Trump did with this is good, you're talking to the wrong guy. I don't think that's a good thing to do. Just like I don't think opposing birthright citizenship is a good thing to do. Just like I don't think getting rid of the jobs of government workers is a good thing to do. Right? I ultimately think what we need is a government of action to fight for working families, to break the power of big monopolies. But if you're focusing on that, you're missing the forest for the trees. It's just like focusing on the Greenland thing, right? If the USA actually goes to war with Norway to seize Greenland or Denmark or whatever, if the USA actually goes to war with Canada, that would be nuts. And yes, I'm against it. But that's what they want you focusing on. They want you talking about LGBT. They want you talking about bathrooms. They want you talking about Trump hurt. They want you talking about that. I'll say what I said before. I think that Elon Musk's salute was totally intentional. And you know why he did it? So you would talk about it. That's why he did it. Because it's a non-issue. And that's what everyone's talking about right now is Elon Musk's Heil Hitler salute. That's what everyone's talking about. He did the Roman salute, the Bellamy salute, the whatever you want to call it. He did it, right? But he did it in a way that gave himself deniability. And he knew that we would all be talking about that, and we wouldn't be talking about the important things. And that he would get a lot of attention for himself. And no Trump supporter is going to stop supporting Trump because of that. And all the people who hate Trump will talk about it nonstop. See, we told you he was a Nazi. And it's not productive in any way. We need to have productive conversations. There are real issues at stake here, like whether or not the war in Ukraine continues, like whether or not we can make peace with China, like whether or not we can actually make peace with Iran right now. There's a lot of things here, a lot of potential for good, like whether the FBI will actually get broken apart, like whether Tulsi Gabbard will actually be the director of national intelligence. There's a lot of potential here to do good. And we got to not get distracted by Greenland or Canada or Panama or you know, Roman Bellamy salutes from Elon Musk or issues like that. You know, I'm not for that. I'm not for that. But I mean, yeah. So there you go. There you go. I mean, you say you're worried about, I mean, I respect your right to be worried. I respect your right to be worried. But there's a lot of people that have pointed out that these policies haven't exactly been hugely beneficial to the communities they're supposed to help out. That doesn't mean they should be gotten rid of. That doesn't mean they're wrong in principle. But, you know, I mean, yeah, I respect your right to be worried about it. What can I say? All right. I learned today that Richmond has a water crisis. Virginia claims state is too poor to fix water treatment facility. Wow. Citizens forced to apply United Way assistance. Total BS. Revenue is up. Yeah. And, you know, I've got the video, the Francis Scott Key Bridge, just up in Baltimore, right? Right. What happened? This is a major bridge that people drive over every day on a major roadway. And in the middle of the night, this happened. You know, and the power grid has been collapsing in California, and then they've just been having huge fires, and they've had a problem putting those fires out because the fact that they sent all the fire equipment to Ukraine, you know, and people were drinking lead in their water in Flint, Michigan, and now we got a water crisis here. Like, America is falling apart internally, and our leaders are loyal to a globalist, imperialist, international system, not to the country and its domestic economy. And that opening, that division, is creating an opportunity that maybe U.S. foreign policy can improve. Maybe our civil liberties can get protected, and maybe we can start to see some improvement in our lives. There's a real opportunity right now. So there we go. Now, this book, I have not seen this book, but you pulled it up. Exterminate Them. Written accounts of murder, rape, and enslavement of North Americans during the California Gold Rush. Well, I have not read that book. Sounds horrible. Very close to where I grew up in Ohio. There was a massacre at a place called Genedenhutton. And it was a horrible massacre of, you know, there was a group of Native Americans who converted to being Moravian Christians. They were pacifists. And during the American Revolution, there were wounded British soldiers who they helped, because they believed their religious obligation was to help anyone who was injured, and they didn't take sides. They were pacifists. And so the American settlers exterminated them, and they lined them all up, and they beat their heads in with hammers. The whole village, they just killed hundreds and hundreds of people. It was a horrible, horrible incident in Ohio, and there's many examples of horrendous genocidal crimes against Native Americans. You know, giving smallpox blankets, I mean, you name it, right? I mean, you know, many, 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 many examples of brutal, horrendous, genocidal murder of Native Americans. And there is absolutely no need to deny that. You know, and that's wrong. And I'm against it. And the Native people deserve the right to sovereignty. They deserve the right to separate from the country if they want to. I wouldn't force them to. At this point, I would say the majority of Native Americans don't necessarily want that. But if they chose to separate from the country, I would support their right to do it. You know, reparations in order to enable economic development of their territory. I'm not opposed to any of that. Right? I just don't fixate on that issue. My focus is not, you know, my focus is not on America as an evil, racist country, and we all need to be feeling bad about it. My focus is on American working people. It is in their economic interest to stand with the people of the world against imperialism. That is my focus. I don't view the American people as the enemy, which is what separates me from the woke left. The woke left views the majority of the American people as the enemy, and I do not. So there you go. And that again, this is awful. I mean, it's horrible. I mean, and I haven't read that book, but I'm sure it involves many horrendous things that were actually true and were actually done. And I will say one person I really don't like is Dinesh D'Souza. That guy is, when he says things like there was no genocide of Native Americans, they all just died from disease. And when he says that, oh, well, the Democrats are racist and supported slavery because they're Marxists, when Karl Marx was a Republican and supported Lincoln. I mean, he is just a flim-flam man on so many levels. He is dishonest about history, and he actually does try to make it sound like there wasn't genocide of the Native Americans. Well, there was. There very much was. But if you want to make change, you can't just stand back and declare yourself to be morally righteous. You have to build a mass movement. We are fighting for the majority, right? We're fighting for the majority against the system. We're not fighting for various minority groups against the majority, right? We're fighting for the majority against the minority imperialists that are exploiting all of us. So just need to be clear on that. Did you follow the recent Davos and your thoughts? I watched Trump's talk and I watched some of Javier Milei's talk. The last Davos talk by Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, I did a very popular debunk video of, because it was all just a talk in defense of neoliberalism. And I debunked it very effectively, and I called it out because there were a lot of people that thought it was the most revolutionary. Oh, he's sticking up to those globalists. No, he wasn't. He was just saying the free market is awesome. There was nothing remotely revolutionary. This time, his talk was even worse. And it was not even a talk defending free market capitalism. It was a talk castigating many things about wokeism that are problematic, that are not good, and saying they're all communism. And, it's like, it's such a nasty lie, and it's like, I'm not interested in defending communism anymore, because the people who make this seem true the most are the communists that have just bent over backwards to become wokeists. Look, North Korea is not a woke country. They don't have many different genders in North Korea. In North Korea, they don't sit around talking about white privilege, right? You go to Vietnam, you go to China, you go to any Marxist country, you think Stalin's Russia, they're not doing the woke thing there. But it's like, this is like a lie that conservatives and communists have agreed on. They all just pretend the Soviet Union was a woke country, and they all just pretend that wokeism is communism. Wokeism is not communism. Wokeism was invented by the CIA, the Congress for Cultural Freedom, the Frankfurt School, Theodore Adorno. All of that woke crap was invented to combat real communism, to combat the Soviet Union, to combat Marxism, Leninism, right? And the whole thing about the authoritarian personality and all of that. We've talked about that endlessly on these streams. I've written about it endlessly. The lassitude-inducing worldview, this pessimistic, the Malthusianism, the anti-populism, all the stuff. Everyone's a fascist, the fascist aesthetic. All this is CIA liberal crap. It has nothing to do with, the tendency of the falling rate of profit, imperialism, the monopolistic capitalism, the 5-year plans of Stalin. It has nothing to do with any of that, right? I mean, if you read an old Communist Party pamphlet from the 1930s from William Z. Foster, Gus Hall, they're not talking about any of that crap. They talk against racism because racism is a tool of the bosses to weaken all working people, right? They're talking against fascism because fascism is a method for saving capitalism by creating a slave labor underclass, and it's a way to beat back the workers' movement. They're talking, it's like they're speaking a completely different language, and they're building a mass populist movement of, to fight for the working class. Wokeism is not communism, and communists think it is. And that's why I can't call myself a communist anymore, because I'm not woke. I'm not woke. I'm an innovationist. I am optimistic. Wokeism is pessimistic. I believe in economic growth. They believe in degrowth. I believe in human creative power and advancing technology. They think we've gone too far. I want to build people up. They want to tear people down. I am not woke. Wokeism is toxic, absolutely toxic. And it has absolutely nothing to do with the exciting new economy that's emerging in the world today as a result of anti-imperialist, anti-colonial revolutions, many of which were led by communists in the 20th century. And I stand with the global movement against imperialism, and I don't stand with wokeism. Wokeism has nothing to do with that. Wokeism, George Soros, all that is a vehicle that they've invented to weaken anti-imperialist movements, right? In Belarus is led by Alexander Lukashenko. They're having an election. Alexander Lukashenko doesn't believe in gay marriage. Alexander Lukashenko calls himself a communist. He defends Stalin. They call Belarus the last Soviet republic. And who is protesting against Alexander Lukashenko? And who's going to declare the election to be rigged as soon as it happens and go out and riot? All the rich kids that are doing woke stuff on their phones. That's who. Like, the idea that wokeism and communism are the same thing is infuriating to me. And, I am for the global anti-colonial, anti-imperialist movement, and I'm not for wokeism. And so the global communist movement has turned against anti-imperialism. And the anti-imperialist countries, they're mainly being targeted by woke people. I mean, that's why we have innovationism as a new political movement. So there you go. There you go. I saw Trump's speech where he talked about peace with Russia. I liked that. He wanted to change U.S. foreign policy. I liked that. And I saw Javier Milei just going on and on against wokeism and how wokeism is communism. Mass migration is communism. I mean, mass migration has a lot to do with free trade. He kept going on about free trade capitalism. Mass migration, that's free trade. That's one thing. If you're for free trade, you should be for mass migration. Free trade means capital has the right to move all over the world, right? It means no protectionism, no tariffs. That's what free trade means. So why is labor not allowed to be free trade oriented? That's weird. So you want corporations to be able to jump from country to country to country, but you don't want working people to be able to do that. Like, that's weird. Aren't you for free trade? Historically, libertarians have been very much in favor of mass migration and immigrant policies. So, there you go. Free trade and mass migration walk hand in hand historically. Right. And the opposition to mass migration is usually tied in with economic protectionism, nationalism. So there you go. All right. What are your thoughts on business policy of the new government? Well, I'm repeating myself, but the new government is pushing austerity. And I don't agree with that, right? I mean, they're getting rid of federal agencies, etc. I mean, I understand why they're doing it. Right now, we have a government that kind of forcibly degrows things. And so the idea is, well, we'll just get the government out of the way and we'll magically have growth. Well, it doesn't work that way. Ultimately, if you want growth, you need a government of action that will break the power of big monopolies and rationally plan the economy to have growth. Right now, we have a government that works with the big monopolies to hold back growth, right? We have fascism, essentially. They want free markets back, and they think free markets will create growth, and they want to get rid of the kind of woke Malthusian government apparatus that holds back growth, and they will fail in that. You will not create growth by cutting. You cannot cut your way into economic growth. I've learned anything when reading about neoliberalism and austerity. You cannot cut your way into growth. If you get rid of the jobs of government workers, if you get rid of public works and public spending, you get rid of social programs, everyone has less money. The richest of the rich, who already have more money than they can imagine, they only invest their money if they can get a return on their investments. The idea that you're just going to lower their taxes by cutting everything in the government and then the economy will just bounce back, it doesn't work that way. They only invest their money if they can get a return on it. Whereas you and me, if we have money, we spend it. And that's what keeps the economy going. So, and that's why Keynesian economics, right? You cannot cut your way into economic growth. And libertarianism, neoliberalism, austerity economics, whatever you want to call it, is a bunch of flim-flam, right? Austrian school, Chicago school, it has never worked anywhere in the world. And don't tell me about the Chilean economic miracle. When Chile implemented austerity in the 1973 coup, it wrecked their economy. Their economy did not start improving until 1980, when Pinochet and the military started renationalizing and reinserting state control over everything, right? So that's just bullshit. If anyone tells you, oh, well, free market policies, they saved Chile, the Chilean economic miracle. The Chilean economic miracle happened after Pinochet took the military and started renationalizing things. Another thing they'll tell you, oh, well, the Soviet Union was bad, but since the fall of the Soviet Union, things have gotten better. Well, in the 90s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, they had free trade policies, and it was devastating. And you know how Russia improved its economy? It started when Putin put oil and gas under state ownership with Gazprom and Rosneft and recentered the state around. Another thing, they always point to the Asian tiger countries. This just shows how dishonest. Right? Milton Friedman will be like, well, capitalism is clearly the answer. Look how rich Hong Kong is. Do you know how much government involvement in the economy there is in Hong Kong? Hong Kong has a government-run healthcare industry. The government is heavily involved in Hong Kong, right? And on top of that, Hong Kong was a center of the global opium trade and organized crime for a long time. It's like, oh, well, or they say, oh, look at South Korea. That proves the free market is better. Do you think that the steel industry of South Korea, POSCO, just magically was created by the free market? No, it was created by Park Chung-hee. The South Korean economy, even today, is heavily run by the government, right? Singapore, they always say, oh, Singapore, that proves capitalism. Singapore is a really state-run economy. The Asian tiger countries are heavily, the military and the government is planning out almost everything. They're very state-run economies. Neoliberal economists, there is just so much lying that goes on. They just depend on people's ignorance, right? They're going to point to the Asian tiger countries as proof of the free market being great when those countries are like the most heavily government controlled you wouldn't believe, right? But they have a low tax rate, I guess. So that, they say, oh, well, Chile under Pinochet, the economy was so great. No, it wasn't. Not until like 1980, after they moved away from the neoliberal policies. In 74, 75, 76, their economy was a disaster, and people were literally starving to death. The Chilean economy in the 70s, when they were doing the Milton Friedman economics, they had 30% unemployment. It was awful. There's just so many lies. Neoliberal economics is a gigantic pile of flim-flam, and it's just what a lot of lower-level capitalists want to hear, right? Lower-level capitalists don't like being crushed by big monopolies, and the big monopolies believe in degrowth, and they want to maintain their position, so they write the regulations. And so your lower-level capitalists, they get crushed, and so they really want to hear the problem is the government. If we just get the government out of the way, everything will magically work. And that doesn't work. The whole history of the 20th century, no one would have ever talked about communism or fascism or any of this stuff if there hadn't been massive failures by the free market. They always want to give you a body count for communism. The body count for free markets and free trade is massive. Famines in China, famines in Ireland, where millions of people died because of the free market policies of the Whig Party. Famines in India, the number of free market famines that have been created by British free trade policies all over the world are absolutely massive. But they don't count because it's ridiculous, right? Every person who ever starves in a communist country is because of communism, but all the famines created by free trade imposed by the British Empire are just, that's not capitalism's fault. It just happens. Neoliberal economics is a bunch of hooey. It's a bunch of flim-flam, and we're going to have to push back against it. And it's going to be difficult because Trumpers are very trained in it. And Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, they have really eat this shit up. The idea that the market just magically solves everything. The only problem we have is we don't have real capitalism. Not that simple. Not going to work that way. So, we have to push back against it. What do you think of Trump asking the Saudis to lower the price of oil as a way to force Russia to end the war? I don't like it, first of all, and it's very naive. Do you think this war is caused by the oil prices? It's caused by the USA trying to push Russia off the world market because they're a competitor in the oil markets. But the idea that, Russia, if you just lower the oil price, Russia won't have any money, so they'll just stop fighting in Ukraine. Russia did everything they could possibly do to not go into Ukraine. They facilitated the Minsk Accords and the Minsk Agreement. They made endless amounts of appeal. The idea that they would go, the oil price dropped, I guess we got no choice. No, this is, again, it looks to me like Trump is getting ready. He wants to end the war. He wants to get credit for ending the war. He wants there to be a photo op with Zelensky and Putin. He wants to get credit for ending the war, but he's trying to push a mean deal. I mean, he's trying to, he's going to be attacked. This is going to happen. I can guarantee you that when there's a peace deal in the works, we're going to be told Trump sold out Ukraine. That's what we're going to be told. Trump sold out Ukraine. So Trump is trying to do everything he can to make it look like he really stuck it to Russia and he made them give up big concessions. It's kind of sad, but Trump is in the same situation the Democrats used to be in when they would negotiate with the USSR, right? They would accuse the Democrats of being soft on communism. So we had the Vietnam War started by a Democrat. We had the Korean War started by a Democrat. The Democrats were constantly trying to prove they weren't soft on communism. So they would go over the top. Well, that's Trump, right? He's going to have to prove he's not soft on Putin. So when he negotiates, he's going to say, oh, I'm threatening to oil prices. I'm threatening to put new sanctions on them. I'm doing this. And I mean, I think at the end of the day, for his own reasons, because Trump wants to be remembered as a peacemaker, and because he said he was going to do it, and he wants that photo op of Zelensky and Putin together, I think Trump will end the war in Ukraine. But there needs to be a photo op, and he needs to put on a blusterous show ahead of time. But I am confident that for his own selfish reasons, Trump will end the war in Ukraine. And we need to come out swinging in favor of that. When it happens, we need to be marching in the streets, loudly supporting the peace deal. Sign the deal. Sign the deal. Sign the treaty. Right? We need to loudly show public support because the Ukrainians are going to lose their minds and they're going to, oh my God, Trump is selling our country down the river. And we need to push back against that as much as we can. We need to be out there supporting the peace deal. And it's going to be hard to do, but we need to do it. We need to do it. And economic localism coexist and complement central economic planning. What does that mean? What does economic localism mean? Because that's a big part of the distributist thing. It's like localism. Oh, we just have a local economy. Rather than big corporations, we have local stores. Well, look, in Nicaragua, the government, Christianity, Socialism, and Solidarity, they have a micro entrepreneurship program where the state bank and the state, government loans money to people to start their own farms and their own businesses on a local level. They grow their own food in Nicaragua. They produce their own food in an organic way all over Nicaragua because the government loans money to farmers. Is that localism? I mean, if you consider that to be localism, sure, right? In Vietnam and their socialist-oriented market economy, the overwhelming majority of Vietnamese adults are technically small business owners. They have some kind of business where they sell their goods to the state if they're a farmer, or they sell their goods to tourists or other people if they're subsidized by the government so they can make enough money to live by doing it. Is that localism? I mean, it depends what you mean by localism, right? If you mean small businesses existing on a local level that are being subsidized by the state, that's a big part of all socialist economies in our time. That's a big part of Iran. That's a big part of Venezuela. I've told the story before. When I was in Venezuela, I went to the Center of African Knowledge, and it's this museum about Afro-Venezuelan heritage, but it's at the top of the building, and there's like a winding, ramp up all along the way. There's all these shops owned by Afro-Venezuelans who've gotten a subsidy from the Venezuelan government to open their own business, to make handbags, to have traditional African art, to do, So is that localism? If you consider that to be localism, sure. It depends what you mean by localism. Localism can also be a degrowth thing, right? It's, we're going to put everything down at the community level, and that's a way to reduce funding and make it easier to privatize services and stuff like that. So it just depends what you mean by localism. But if localism means subsidizing small business owners, subsidizing people to, it means investing in local communities so that working people can thrive with their own business or buying their own home in the neighborhood or whatever. If that's what localism means, absolutely. It's actually a big part of centrally planned economies in our time. It's a big part of what the Chinese Communist Party does in China, why they're so popular. Xi Jinping, from what I understand, in order to move up the ranks of the Chinese Communist Party, you first have to be a mayor. And then it is your job to double the income of everyone in your local area where you're a mayor. And then you can move up the next rank. And then it's like they have you have to improve living conditions on a local level before you move up to the regional level, before you move up to the national level. It's kind of wild the way the Chinese Communist Party has set things up. They are so growth focused in their central planning. It's all results driven. Like, it's not about how good of a speech you can give. It's not about, it's about, can you deliver the results? And so, Xi Jinping, he was the mayor of a village in China, and his job was to make sure that village, that everyone's income went up. And he went and he studied in Iowa. Did you know this? Xi Jinping, when he was a young man, when he was the mayor of some village in China, he went to Iowa and he studied, and he lived in a farmhouse in Muscatine, Iowa. He lived in a farmhouse and he studied farming. And they have a replica of the house he lived in Iowa. That's a museum in China that people pay money to go inside, and they got Star Trek wallpaper in the kid's room and everything. In the 80s, Xi Jinping lived in Iowa when he was just the mayor of some rural village, and he studied the farming techniques, and he went back to the village and he got their farming industry going, and everyone's incomes went up, and they said, all right, you doubled the income of everyone in that village. You're qualified. They moved him up the next level, right? You have to deliver results, right? They are growth oriented. Growth is good. I believe in economic growth. I am a pro-growth guy. I am all about that. Well, it looks like we have reached the end. That is the end of the super chats. Do we have more Rumble rants? Hempcar says, why would Canada become part of the USA? Would they vote for this? Would Americans? Let me put it this way. I don't think the people in Toronto and Ontario, they don't want to be part of America. The trucker convoy was largely people in the western regions of Canada. A lot of them are deeply conservative. The people that were part of the trucker convoy, the deeply conservative people in the less populated regions of Canada, a lot of them are very pro-Trump, very conservative. They think that the government in Canada is communist, and a lot of them would love to join with the United States. And there's some stuff going on. Look, for a long time, when that trucker convoy got going, the trucker convoy, you'll notice there were a number of sects in the trucker convoy. There's a woman of Filipino heritage who calls herself the Queen of Canada. She had a sect that was following her. There was another sect that was using indigenous symbols that had the swastika in it. And there were a number of interesting sects that emerged out of the trucker convoy in Canada. And a lot of them were calling for the United States to invade Canada. And that says to me there was intelligence stuff going on in that whole thing. I mean, that's what it says to me. And that, there have been certain personalities in the United States that arose non-organically and just kind of emerged on the internet that have been calling for the USA to invade Canada for a long time. And now Trump is saying, and that makes me think there's intelligence stuff going on here. Okay. There are sections of the deep state that want a chunk of Canada. They don't want Ontario, but they want the western parts that are close to Alaska. And that the fact that was floating around in the trucker convoy a lot, and now that was floating around in some of the weird internet circles that arose non-spontaneously out of nowhere, and they were always saying, "Oh yeah, it's based. The USA should invade Canada." I totally just thought of this myself because I'm smart, man. Certain, internet idiots were talking about, yeah, we got to invade Canada, dude. It's based. Yeah. Certain people were talking that way, and there's intelligence stuff going on. All right. I mean, there is one section of the deep state that wants Western Canada, probably for, I think, a couple different reasons. One, I think they want the minerals, they want the natural gas. They want a pipeline connecting to Alaska, and part of it is that they're less tied in with the globalist economy. And part of it is good that they do want, they're trying to pivot the U.S. economy eastward toward Alaska and stuff like that, and that's good actually. That might be why they're more friendly to Russia because of that, and it may, so part of it might be good, part of it might be bad, but there's a section of the American intelligence apparatus that's been thinking that way for quite some time. Okay. That's very clear to me. I've been seeing signs of this with the trucker convoy, with weird internet personalities. Now Trump is saying it. So, it's out there, right? And it may be that the people, out there want that. It might happen. It might happen that people, that a chunk of Canada joins with the United States. I don't think there'll be a war over it, right? If there's a war, that's a disaster, and I don't think that'll happen. But, and there is a precedent. People have said there's a precedent for this. And honestly, I just, it is what it is. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, that's all I can say about that. So, yeah. Okay. Well, you know what, folks? It's almost midnight, and we've gone for over 3.5 hours. I do appreciate it. You guys did come through with good super chats there towards the end. I do appreciate that. I'll be back. As I said, in the next couple days, maybe tomorrow, depending on how my day goes, maybe Monday, we're going to do a long stream in honor of Harpal Brar, who just passed. Because there's so much that I've learned from Harpal Brar. He's a name that I just kept hearing year after year after year. And then I ended up doing 25 episodes of a podcast with him. There's so many stories to tell there. So much there about Harpal Brar. So at some point very soon, I'm going to do a tribute to Harpal Brar, the British communist leader who just died, who's been on this YouTube channel many times, 25 episodes. We did a long form interview with him one time. So we're gonna give a tribute to Harpal Brar. I'm going to talk about what Harpal meant to me, and it's going to be a long stream because there's going to be a lot there. So there we go. All right. Well, I'm going to put on the closing music. And then we'll call it a night. All right. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.